So, good afternoon, members, and welcome back, everybody, to the first sitting this month of the Education Committee after our summer recess. So I hope that everybody had a good summer break and is feeling rested and ready for the new term. The committee meeting, as usual, will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. So I'd advise those in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode, and that all devices must be muted. You can connect to the Assembly Wi-Fi, and the password details for that are available in the gallery rules. It's not permitted to take photographs or record any of the meeting. So that's the housekeeping stuff dealt with. I've had no apologies. Looks like we've got a full house today, so we can move on to item 2, chairperson's business. Try not to take too much time with this. Obviously, it is good to be back after the summer recess. We are going to have a lot of work to get through in the months ahead, as we are starting. And today we have our first evidence session on our mini inquiry. How many that inquiry has proven to be is maybe debatable, but our mini inquiry into RSE. So I will have to ask for members' cooperation today in terms of keeping questions short and to the point to get through those briefings. There will be weeks, I think, we're likely to have three evidence sessions for those, so they'll be kept to 30 minutes, and we need to try and stick quite tightly to those time scales. But in terms of changes to personnel in the committee, I would like to formally welcome Michelle Guy to the Education Committee, who has replaced Kate Nicholl. So Michelle, you're very welcome here today, and I would like to just formally put on record my thanks to Kate for her work over the last number of months since restoration in February, for her work on the committee. And I know there are a number of issues that Kate was very keen to profile in the committee, not least in terms of asylum and immigration and how that connects into the education system, and I think we will all hopefully be able to keep the focus on that work that she put a spotlight on. A couple of other things just to add at this stage. So that would be, we do have an invitation from the chair to the chair, myself, for the community relations in school, to an event that I've just asked. Just draw members' attention to that, page 5 of the meeting pack. I am unable to attend that, so I'd welcome anybody who is able to attend. I think it's an important event that we have committee representation at, so if somebody can, through the clerk, make their availability known on that. I also need to point out that we had an informal briefing on Tuesday of this week with the department in relation to an update on school uniforms policy, on the ongoing consultation into that, and into proposed timescales for legislation coming forward on that. So I'd like to thank the department for organising that briefing and for proactively reaching out to us. It was appreciated and it was very helpful. There will be a full note of that included in next week's pack for anyone who was not able to attend. But it does look like legislation is going to be coming forward fairly rapidly, potentially before the end of the year, which is very welcome. And we will look forward to making a start on the scrutiny work that will be associated with that. The only other thing that I want to highlight at this stage, and it is an item of correspondence, and I just wanted to pull it out as I feel it's quite significant. I'm conscious correspondence there's a lot has come in over the summer, so it was one I just wanted to make sure did get attention early on in the meeting in case it was to drop off if we're short on time. It's in your tabled papers. We've got correspondence came in from PPR, the Practice and Participation of Rights, in relation to concerns that they have had brought to their attention around the EA no longer supporting asylum seeker children in contingency accommodation with accessing a school place. In the normal run of things, we would expect children in contingency accommodation to be in there for a very short period of time, and in that context, that policy may make sense. But when we are looking with children in contingency accommodation for many months in some cases, who are then not accessing education, I did think it was worth just highlighting that, and I would want to just seek committee agreement at this stage that we do highlight those concerns around the change in policy to both the EA and also to the Executive Office, because I think probably the bigger picture here is the time the children are spending in that accommodation, and if that could be addressed and they were moved on into that dispersal accommodation on a slightly longer term basis, it would help address the issue. Are members content that we do just pull that piece of correspondence at this stage and deal with it in that way? We agreed? Okay, thank you. We do have a lot to get through, so I'll not, other than really just welcoming everyone back, I will happily move on to item 3 on the agenda. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Has anybody got anything in relation to today's agenda that they would want to highlight? No, it's fine. If anything arises, as always, do just indicate during the meeting. Item 4 on the agenda is matters arising, and that just briefly just to speak to the RSC inquiry, and particularly to the survey consultation that we're wanting to issue out as part of that. So the survey, and I want to thank first of all Clark and their team for putting that together. It's been a fairly big piece of work, so I really do want to thank you for your time on that. The survey for teachers and parents are ready to go on the Citizen Space platform, but the young people survey is just being finalised. There was quite a bit of work done with the Youth Assembly, so I'd like to extend my thanks to them for their work on this over the summer, just to make sure that there was a good co-creation process there involving a youth voice. So just given that there's a slight delay to get those last bits finished with the Youth Assembly, our members content that the finalised surveys will be issued out hopefully by the end of this week, or as soon as the pack is available, with a view to being then subject to agreement at next week's committee, those surveys being launched. Are members agreed? Okay, that's fine. So that takes us on to the draft minutes. They're actually in your table papers. Sorry, and also yes, there is a media notice. Should draw that also in your tabled papers. And I just want to check our members' content that is agreed and released.
Is that on it? Just because table papers.
I'll defer to one of the clerk's team here.
Table papers. And what page it's on? No, can't see anything. The draft minutes and the CRC stuff. I can't see anything that's titled.
Yeah, I think I'd noted it. It seemed to maybe fall in the wrong section. It's in under item 6. Is it the Human Rights Commission? It has just, I think, maybe dropped into the wrong section of that. But it is in there.
Oh, apologies about that.
No, it's okay.
It's just the notice to the media that the surveys will launch on the committee website, and that others can send more expansive responses or submissions about RSE to the committee website from the start date of next week, essentially. So it's a fairly routine notice. Yeah.
I thought it was a graphic or something.
No, nothing as exciting as that.
All right.
just text.
I like pictures.
We'll work on that for next week. Are we agreed that media notice goes out?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So that back to item 5, draft minutes. They are also in tabled papers. I would propose they are a complete and accurate record of proceedings of our meeting of the 26th of June. Are members agreed?
Great.
Just get those signed. So that takes us to item 6 on the agenda, and I would just advise that is an oral briefing from the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, and this is the first oral briefing we're going to receive on our inquiry into RSE. So I would refer members to a briefing note from the committee clerk at page 10, as well as some other materials following that in relation to the inquiry, including terms of reference and briefing papers from the RAISE service. And I would encourage members to read those. They are long and detailed, but there's a lot of really helpful information in there. And then at page 55 of your packs, the Human Rights Commission has supplied a briefing note as well for members. So that is all there for you. So just while everyone's getting settled, I would like to formally welcome everyone here today who's come from the Human Rights Commission. We have Alison Kilpatrick, the Chief Commissioner from the Commission. We have Julia Buchanan, Senior Policy and Research Officer from the Commission, and Colin Cahy, the Director of Policy from the Commission. So you're all very welcome here today. You have the privilege of being the first organisation to present evidence in relation to our RSE inquiry, so we're really looking forward to getting that kicked off, and really at this stage I would hand over to you. Our briefings in terms of the inquiry slots are a little bit shorter, and we have a fair bit of evidence to get through. So we are looking at this session taking around 30 minutes. So up to 10 minutes for a presentation, but and then whatever time we have left, we will we'll move to question and answer. But
we'll be able to keep it shorter than that.
Yes.
Take my watch off.
Yes. And look, if we are getting close to 10 minutes, I may just step in just to let you know, because I know it's easy when you're in your flow to lose track of time. But
I've actually prepared what I want to say unusually for me, so it should be 10 minutes. Well, thank you, and you've introduced us all, so I won't take up time doing that. Really do appreciate the invitation again, and really welcome the mini inquiry you're undertaking. So, Chief Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission, as you rightly say, my two colleagues, Julia and Colin, are very expert in these issues, and they've come and will probably answer all the difficult questions and correct me when I'm wrong. You've invited us to share observations on RSE in post-primary schools, and we know that stems from our report, also the CEDAW committee, etc. So what I thought I would do is begin with a very brief overview of the relevant human rights framework, conscious, of course, that most of you know all this stuff already, so if it's too simple, do stop me, but it really is going to be very brief. I thought maybe some scene setting might be helpful. I'll then turn to our own investigation, draw out some of the key issues from a human rights perspective, and I just reiterate that we are looking at human rights standards, not at anything else. So amongst other things, we are obliged to ensure that government and public authorities protect, respect and fulfil the human rights of everyone in Northern Ireland. In 2018, the UN Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, from here on I'll just say CEDAW, which you'll recognise, published the report of its inquiry into sexual and reproductive health rights in Northern Ireland. It made a number of recommendations, one of which was for the UK Government and NI Executive to make, and I'll quote, age-appropriate, comprehensive, I've lost the actual quotation, there we go, and scientifically accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights, compulsory component of the curriculum for adolescents, covering prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion, and monitor its implementation. And the reason the exact wording of that is important is that started everything off. That recommendation was later given domestic effect through the 2019 Act, and that placed a duty on the Secretary of State to address that recommendation, which he did. Now, to inform the development of proposals, the Commission initiated an investigation, its own investigation, into the provision of RSE in post-primary schools in Northern Ireland, grounded obviously in the CEDAW Committee's recommendation, but also in line very much with our own powers and duties. At the conclusion of that investigation, Secretary of State then introduced regulations in response to CEDAW, but coming after some engagement with us. So we don't take responsibility for it, but we were certainly involved in some of the discussion, and we don't necessarily endorse everything that's in it. Among other things, the regulations place a duty on the Department of Education to publish a report, and that's by September 26. We understand we will be consulted on that, and we look forward to doing that. We'll certainly give it our best attention. Access to and provision of RSE engages a number of human rights, detailed in Chapter 2 of our investigation report, so I can speed through that. The most relevant, however, European Convention on Human Rights, incorporated into domestic law by the Human Rights Act, so there's no question but that it must be complied with, and it includes the right to education, and that's Article 2, Protocol 1. That also requires the state, when exercising its functions in relation to education, to respect parents' religious and philosophical convictions. So on the one hand, you have a right to education and another right to respect. And we do go into the balance to be drawn in our report. The European Court has also considered the balance of rights and held that parents may not refuse a child's right to education on the basis of their religious or philosophical convictions. It explained that it aims to safeguard pluralism in education. Furthermore, that the right to an education and the right of parents to ensure such education and teaching is in conformity with their own religious and philosophical convictions, and that should be read together, so they don't cancel each other out. They're not in competition with each other. Should also draw your attention to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, obviously, which you'd be very familiar. The Convention, along with a general comment, number 4, notes the requirement for states parties to provide adolescents with access to specifically sexual and reproductive information. The CRC committee has noted with concern the barriers to sexual education, including parental exemptions. In its examination of the UK last year, the committee recommended that the UK, including the Northern Ireland Executive, should integrate comprehensive, age-appropriate, evidence-based education on sexual and reproductive health into mandatory school curricula that includes sexual diversity, and again I'm going to quote, sexual diversity, sexual and reproductive health rights, responsible sexual behaviour and violence prevention. It stated that this should be, quote, without the possibility for faith-based schools or parents to opt out of such education. Its rationale is that comprehensive and accurate RSE is essential to fulfilment of a range of human rights, including the right to education, but also the right to health and even the right to life. It also has, as we know, an important role to play in preventing abuse and violence and promoting gender equality. So this is not just about the mechanics, this is about protecting children. We began our investigation in late 2021, published our report in June 23, and the methodology is outlined in the report. But I'm going to just very briefly say a couple of words about that because I've been asked about it before. So briefly, our investigation focused on the legal policy and regulatory framework for RSE in post-primary schools, as it should have done, because that is our role and remit. It included analysis by independent experts of relevant data and documentation, which we then drew upon. We did not engage directly with students or teachers, and nor did we observe the teaching of RSE within schools. Others, such as the Education Training Inspectorate, do that work, and we were careful not to duplicate their role, so we chose not to. Our investigation found that the curriculum did not meet human rights standards, including specifically the recommendation made by CEDAW. It referenced some positive examples of schools providing comprehensive and scientifically accurate RSE, but found that in the majority of schools this was not the case. More troubling was the record that in some cases materials were not comprehensive, pluralistic, objective, and in some cases the materials were outdated and did not reflect relevant changes to the law. Our report therefore recommended both amending the law to make age appropriate, etc. I won't bore you with the quote again, to include prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion. But a compulsory component of the curriculum was key, and then it should be monitored, so implementation of that should be monitored. We welcomed publication of the 2003 regulations, but we did recommend further action beyond that. So this mini-inquiry we very much welcome, and I say thank you again for having us. We're very keen to work with you in progressing it. We have also commenced a follow-up, which we'll share with you in due course, hopefully quite quickly. Some unanswered questions, I'll speed along, such as whether the department considers that the duty in the 2003 regulations extends beyond the provision of education and prevention of early pregnancy and terminations. That's one of the unanswered questions we're going to be addressing in more detail. We're also exploring how the provisions on the right to withdraw a parent to withdraw a child from education or parts of education, how they're reflected in policy and practice. We're concerned that the process for monitoring is not effective. For example, we are unsure that sufficient data is being collected since the regulations came into force, and in particular we wonder if any proper data is being collected on parents opting to withdraw children from lessons. We recommend that data should be collected, including the reasons given for withdrawal, and that it is disaggregated to determine whether any specific groups are disproportionately affected, so a very specific thing that can be done to ensure proper monitoring. There is a similar but not identical provision in England, but in Wales there's no right to withdraw. The High Court there held that there was not a breach of parents' rights, and we anticipate further cases which we'll bring back to you obviously, but this is not settled in relation to the right to withdraw. We believe the regulations are a good first step, but that schools must be supported to develop their capacity to deliver RSE, and that this provision, as we say, must be monitored over time and data analysed. The Education Training Inspectorate Northern Ireland will be central to this, so its recent initiative is also welcomed to improve oversight of RSE delivery. So I'm going to leave it there, other than to say, just to sort of conclude with these few words, that we recognise the debate and apprehension around some of this, but we also recognise that some of that has been fuelled by maybe misinformation or even disinformation in some cases about what this entails and about what is being recommended. So I think to overcome that, to put everyone's mind at ease, what would be helpful is better communication and information shared with the educators, parents and wider society. And the department might want to consider how it can raise awareness of the issues and what is suggested to tackle them, but also proactively look at the benefits of holistic RSE and address the myths and misconceptions that may contribute to parental concern and the withdrawal of children from class. That's not to say we dismiss that out of hand, and our report stays very neutral in relation to a lot of that. So thank you for the opportunity. I think that's within 10 minutes just about. We're here to answer whatever questions you have.
Thank you very much, and I know it's a lot to ask to squeeze all that into 10 minutes. And I think I just want to pick up on some of the comments you made just at the end there. I think the committee was very mindful when these regulations landed at our first sitting a number of months back, that we'd had no opportunity really to be engaged in any sort of scrutiny process with it, and really the work had already been done at Westminster level. And I think we were, across the board unanimously agreed that it would be appropriate for the committee to take a very focused evidence-based approach on looking at this issue. It can be an issue that descends into very, very subjective positioning, and that's on all sort of sides and angles across the spectrum of the debate. So we were very keen to make sure that we took a holistic and a broad and an evidence-based approach to this, in terms of how we look at really what the future of RSE and the delivery of that curriculum and any need for legislative reform might look like in Northern Ireland. So I'm hoping that our evidence sessions will be characterised by a focus on a commitment to hearing from the experts and hearing evidence. So thank you. It was great to have a rights-based perspective coming in really at the very outset. I just really wanted to pick up on one statement you made there, that your report or your investigation into RSE was quite clear that you didn't feel the current curriculum as it stands doesn't meet human rights standards. Could you just expand a bit on where you think those gaps are and what would need to be done to bring our curriculum on an age-appropriate basis right through from primary to post-primary to address that gap in the human rights standard compliance?
In a way, it's going to sound like I'm ducking this. I'm not. We know what the basic minimum should be to protect children's rights to education, which is, say, scientifically accurate, comprehensive. The determination of what is comprehensive and scientifically accurate is going to be for others, because we are not experts in that. We do know that it's got to include things like reproduction, reproductive rights, pregnancy, consent, all those things that protect children, both at school and beyond that. Colin may want to say, Colin was very involved in the actual drafting of the report. Do you want to say something more specific?
And in terms of the minimum content order, whenever we commenced our investigation, we were looking at it prior to the regulations coming in. There has always been this discussion and debate as to how prescriptive it is, whether RSE is covered or not covered within the minimum content order. And our view, really looking at the wording included at Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, was that wasn't explicit enough in terms of issues, and this is in agreement with the Gillen report in terms of consent, in line with what the expert panel on the LGBTQ plus strategy have said, that there's a need for that to be specifically referred to, and also a need for specific reference to violence against women. And those would be some of, but not the totality of elements that the international human rights system says needs to be included within your compulsory curriculum on relationship and sex education.
And just to add to that, you'll see the experts were concerned at some of the teaching that was going on in some of the schools. So clearly it would need to start by addressing some of that. So it would need to make it so that sort of ill-informed message isn't taught to children.
I think we have a number of statutory bodies coming in to give evidence, and I think one of the things that comes through in their reports even is that there is, a stated on record publicly, teachers saying they do not feel confident delivering this material. So there is definitely work to be done in that space, and I think that's something our inquiry will want to look at. I may as well just go there, because the issue of parental opt-outs has been probably the one that there is some nervousness around, and I would preface any remarks I make first of all by emphasising I am a parent, so So, I am absolutely, I have skin in the game here. So it's vital that parents are involved in their children's education. That for me is an absolute given. But you have highlighted the challenge in terms of just that intersection of the child's rights and the right to education, and then that parental right around the respect for religious and philosophical convictions, and then how that feeds in to the opt-out provisions. So, in terms of, I could ask a question just in two parts. In terms of the current provisions that were brought in with the new regulations that were brought in by the Secretary of State, there were quite clear and explicit opt-out provisions built into that. So I wondered if you could maybe give some comment from your organisation's perspective, from a rights perspective, where you think that sits in terms of respecting the rights of the child. Does it provide enough protections in that regard? And do you have a sense of how we kind of square that circle around those conflicting rights in the space? Because it is where the conflict seems to come up when the issue is debated, and it would be good to see a space where maybe they don't see those rights as clashing, but where they can, they can be seen as complementary. But I would be interested to hear your views on that aspect of the issue.
That's a very good way to ask, if you don't mind me saying, because human rights law allows a margin of, they call it margin of appreciation, just means allows for different views on this according to member states' preferences and otherwise, so long as the rights are not undermined entirely. So there is scope for, and when I talked about the right to education, there is a provision saying parents' right to have a child educated in a certain way, but a child has a right to be educated. So parental view can't strip a child of its rights. Julia's going to talk more a wee bit, I think, on she's looked into some of the case law in a bit more detail than I have, but just human rights is often this balancing exercise, and it can sometimes just come down to judgment. The Committee on the Rights of the Child has a slightly different view to the European Court of Human Rights at the minute, but we're expecting the law to change very slightly. We're not in a position to say categorically whether parents should be allowed to opt out or not opt out. We would say it depends on whether or not children are still being educated comprehensively and scientifically accurately. And it also depends an awful lot on the age of the child, obviously, on the capacity and competence of the child. I'm going to let Julia answer the rest of that, and then I might come back to just where we stand as a commission.
Yeah, as Alison said, it is an evolving area of jurisprudence, and it's a bit of a grey area still. The UN Committee on the Rights of the Child is really clear that there shouldn't be any option for opt-outs. They would see that as a violation of the child's right, and that the child's right is paramount.
Where was that, Julia, you got that from?
The UN Committee on the Rights of the Child.
Okay.
So their concluding observations from last year, they were very clear that there shouldn't be opt-outs. However, the European Court, and obviously it's the European Convention, which is incorporated into domestic law, it's a little bit less clear. Effectively, the jurisprudence at the minute indicates that while a state may make provision for a parent to withdraw their child from RSE, a parent does not have the right to withdraw the child. So that's been interpreted differently. England does have a withdrawal. Wales High Court there determined that there shouldn't be an opt-out, and both are compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights, so both approaches are fine at the minute. That could change if a child or a group of children or a children's rights representative body were to take a case in a Council of Europe member state. There's a chance that jurisprudence could develop further. I suppose in terms of how you kind of strike that balance, one of the main things would be listening to the voice of the child. And again, NIHRC has lots of guidance on that as well. Could
I just ask, Julie, in terms of the scope in our system to hear the voice of the child, do you think that is prevalent enough in terms of the opt-out provisions that were introduced in law earlier in the year?
I think our investigation, and Colin will correct me, and I think found that there was maybe not enough room for children to contribute to the development of the curriculum. And in terms of the opt-out, we haven't seen any of the data yet, and I appreciate it's still really early stages. We don't know how much that withdrawal is being used. The guidance that was issued in January in the circular isn't really clear on. The guidance says that a year 12 students must consent to being opted out. It doesn't really explain what happens in that situation. if a year 12 doesn't want to be opted out, but their parent
I think
does,
the phrase is not object,
not object.
which
okay.
I think that did give me a bit of pause
Yes, you're
looking
right,
at this,
you're
of not object. And I think there's a pro forma provided by the department where the parent just
Template
signs, my
letter,
child does not
yeah.
object. Which to me, I'm just, that doesn't feel, and I fully agree
Collective
that
voice,
parents should
yeah.
absolutely be heard in this space. I think that is, I don't think there's any sense that parents should ever feel any sort of curriculums being imposed upon them or their child. But to be able to just have a blanket statement, my child does not object, without some capacity for the child's view to be heard, for me it doesn't feel like a balance
Yeah, and
necessarily. It would be good to just see if that could be strengthened perhaps.
If I could just add this, however, there is a minimum content order which determines minimum amount of education the child receives and the content of that education. This is no different in many ways. And in Northern Ireland, the opt-out applies, I think it's only to prevention of early pregnancy and termination of pregnancy. So it's it doesn't appear to allow an opt-out in relation to some of the other issues we're talking about, consent and all of those things. This is not RE, it's not religious education, and there is a place there for ethos and beliefs and all of that, but a child does have a right to education, and there is the right for the state to determine what that education should be. There's a very limited right of parents to remove a child from education, because ultimately the child has a right to be educated. So there's this little space somewhere where it has to be negotiated. I think the European Court of Human Rights would say that that's up for the states to determine that, so long as the fundamental right of a child to be educated to a certain standard is not undermined. So it's I don't pretend this is easy. And we say, I mean, in some ways it's very simple. All children, certainly of a certain age, are entitled to information that is going to protect them and protect their health and their life. And that's something no parent should deprive them of. However, parents also have a right to influence what information their child receives.
What is it? We wouldn't probably be having this inquiry if it was easy, would we? So it's
Are you here?
It is undoubtedly complex. Look, I'm going to try and practice what I preach and bring other members in here, but thank you for that. So I'll bring Deputy Chair in, and then for any other members to indicate, I haven't been picking up indications. So
thanks. And I just want to continue this particular conversation and maybe come at it from a different angle, that if the legislation that was introduced here didn't allow for an opt-out, would there be any human rights concerns on the part of your organisation?
We sense that Colin's dying to say something. I'll tell you what, as far as I'm concerned, there would be concerns, yes, because parents do have a right to respect for their beliefs and how their child is educated. However, a court has already tested that in Wales and found that it wasn't incompatible. So long as they're considered and balanced, and I think ultimately it's perfectly proper and compatible with human rights to say that the child's right to education trumps the parent's right to respect.
Yeah, and just
it doesn't mean to any information or about anything.
Yeah, and just Alison, in terms of that judicial review in Wales, which found in favour of the government and against the parents, what precedent was that court using, or what law were they using when they came to that particular judgment? Very
similar. So the legislation introduced there was a no opt-out for parents, and it was a parent and child, I think of post-primary age, who took the judicial review. So they were looking at the domestic legislation, which didn't give an opt-out, comparing that to the Human Rights Act and the Convention, which says parents have a right to respect. They said that when developing that legislation, they had correctly balanced and taken account of all the relevant factors, and that the education from which you couldn't opt out was the basic, scientifically accurate, comprehensive education necessary for a child, and that a child was entitled to for its own protection and education as it got older. It will be it will take account of things like the age of the child. It will take account of, I suppose, what the content of the lesson is. Colin? You were...
Yeah, I was just going to emphasise, because that's the point, the margin of appreciation. So in that case, the High Court in England and Wales looked very closely at the case law that was there and found that there wasn't definitive judgments from the European Court of Human Rights on that topic. So they said that the state, or in this case a devolved administration within the state, had the discretion to provide an opt-out or not to provide an opt-out. And as Alison has emphasised, they looked at the curriculum that was in place and found it to be scientifically accurate and giving an objective lesson plans that were about empowering and educating children and making sure that they were able to face the challenges of the modern world.
Just to draw on that as well, that judge in Wales drew on jurisprudence from the European Court looking at that Article 2, Protocol 1, which gives the right to education. The first sentence is the right to education, and the second sentence looks at parental rights. So she was drawing on that jurisprudence around that right and how that's been interpreted before, and so she felt that the opt-out was compatible with what the European Court had interpreted before.
Thank you.
Do you want me to say where we think it's going? I'm prepared
Sure,
to take a pot if you don't hold it against me. Where I suspect it's going next is that there will be further challenges from both children and also parents. And I think ultimately what is going to be decided is that it still remains within this margin of appreciation, but that so long as the education reaches the minimum standard, which in our case we say should be scientifically accurate, comprehensive, etc., and should include early pregnancy and termination. So long as it reaches that standard, then the parents can opt out from any additional. Is where I personally think it's going, given the jurisprudence. But it may not. They may stick simply where they are and prefer to fudge it and just say to states, there is this margin, you can operate within it. I suspect if a child brings a case, however, I think probably your view as well, Julia, if a child brings a case, we suspect it's going to go slightly further than the European Court has so far, but not probably as far as the Committee on the Rights of the Child has gone. If that's at all helpful.
No, that is helpful. David, you'd indicated.
Thanks, Chair. I think for me, it's the phrase that the right of the child to education seems to be more about the empowering the state to impart its view of these issues rather than necessarily really about the rights of the child. And whilst I'm not going to ask a question on it, I am disappointed with some of the report that the language around some of the faith ethics around this and so on seems to be discussed always in a fairly negative tone, and I don't think that does respect the balance between the right to education and the right for families to impart their faith.
If you have I have the report in front of me. Do you have a particular
I'm just going to move on. We can come back to it, but I do want to move on to the questions just because we are time limited. But I just did want to give my view on that. I was just wondering, in terms of the report, whether you could give figures to me around how many, and I have a list here, how many schools you've contacted in relation to the consultation, how many teachers were contacted and spoke to, how many pupils, how many governors, and how many RSE lessons you perhaps observed in the course of the research.
As I said at the start, we didn't observe any classes and we didn't speak to children because there are other organisations that do that. It's also not our job to assess to sit on the shoulder of teachers. What we looked at was the human rights standards. We looked at what the law required, whether there was a gap in the protection of children's rights. There's
quite a lot of commentary about what's going on in schools, though, and it appears that you haven't talked to anybody involved with schools.
Oh, no, we have. We part of the investigation, there's a difference between observing and talking to and requesting information. So we contacted everyone. We received detailed information from 149 schools, including all the lesson plans. We went on to the various wellbeing hubs and the RSE hub and looked at all of that. So it's not, we don't feel ill-equipped to comment.
No teachers or parents directly, just checking?
Not directly, no, because others did. And if you look at the ETNI report, they comment on that, so that's their job to do that. It's not our job to do that. It's our job to say what the standards are, and it's for others to meet those standards or tell us why those standards are wrong. So it's not about, and it sort of comes back to the core of this, if you don't mind me saying, it's about entitlement to education. So in some ways, it's what is set out as the entitlement within this jurisdiction. That's all we're looking at. We're not looking at whether teachers are doing it nicely or not. That's for Etne.
Could I ask who made up the independent panel of experts?
Some academics.
Okay, you're not prepared to go further than that in terms of who these academics were?
No, I'm not prepared to give the names. We've been through this many times, including at the launch, and then since we've been asked. We've reached an objective, informed decision as to why we won't share the names. What I can tell you is they're from UCL, University College London. They are experts. They are independent, and they gave us their research findings. This report is ours. So if you have any problems or anybody has a problem with the report, it's with us, it's not with them.
Well, of course.
That's all I would...
Absolutely, but of course, without knowing who these people are, we can't make our own open decision on what biases or agenda these people may have.
No, but if you think the report's biased, then address that with me.
Yep, and have at the outset of this, but I do just want to make that point. We don't know who these experts are. We talked quite a lot in this committee about we're going to be evidence based and we're going to talk to experts and so on. We are all aware that you can find an expert that can say most anything, and they'll come from different directions, and that'll be something for this committee to discuss. But we don't know who these experts are. We don't know what agendas they bring to the table. And we've just discussed you haven't talked to anyone, for any teachers, any pupils, any governors. You've had some engagement with schools, and I'm satisfied with that response. Thank you very much.
I was going to say we're very much over time there on that inquiry, so I will be moving on.
I do need to come back though and say that if there is any evidence that this is biased in any way, you can draw our attention to it in the report. So if there's anything in the report that you think is biased, draw that to my attention, because we stand over the contents of the report. We chose not to name the individuals because of threats that were being received in relation to this whole space of work. It's not unusual for researchers to be engaged on an independent basis and us then to reach a view ourselves. So this is our view. We're very open and frank about it. If anyone has a problem with it, it's with me rather than them, and we've chosen not to name them. And
no, I do accept that, but I do just want to make that point.
That's where I'm leaving it. No, I understand that.
Conscious of time, Danny, you had indicated next.
Thank you, and thank you for the report and all the work you're doing. I was wondering, could you elaborate on any gaps that may exist in the provision of RSE for special schools and in post-16 as well?
Yeah, do you want to, Julia, is that one of yours? Or?
Just to say that it's one of the recommendations for further investigation. At the end of our report only looked at post-primary mainstream. Yep. So I can't really go into much detail other than to say we do recognise that that's an area that needs further exploration.
We're aware of the gaps rather than have identified exactly what needs to be done to fill the gaps, but we know it's not, we know it's not sufficiently provided in mainstream education, so we know it's probably much less in other. Colin?
The Gillen report did make recommendations in relation to children with special needs and the importance of them receiving education on consent. So in a way, we didn't feel the need to duplicate what the Gillen report had already done there. And we fully endorse that recommendation that needs to be looked at and provided for. Post-16, the minimum content order doesn't extend really in that area. And I suppose logically looking at it, some education in that sick form period would seem to be an important time in a child's education where they should be receiving RSE. And there's nothing to stop the Assembly from bringing forward an amendment to the minimum content order in terms of specifying that.
In England, they looked specifically at this just before turning 16, and some children may ask for an element of sex education, in which case it must be provided, and the parental opt-out is overridden. And that's in 3 terms, is it, coming up to the age of 16? Yeah. And the reason 16 is so relevant is that it's the legal age of consent. So a child is quite entitled to ask for information to protect the child when it's reached 16 or above. But that's probably as close as it gets to anything specific.
Thank you. Okay.
On any other indications? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Robbie, did you indicate? So go, Robbie.
Ladies first.
I don't know who was. I don't know who was in first.
Short,
we'll go Cara, Robbie.
Okay, I'll be very quick.
Yeah.
Thank you all
Oh,
very
Sharon,
much
Thank you.
for a very informative briefing. I just have one question, and it's just around children who are homeschooled in Northern Ireland. Maybe this might be one for the department who is coming later, but can you outline the scope of responsibility that the department has on ensuring that children in Northern Ireland who are homeschooled are educated on these vital topics? Because I just think we as a committee and we as an assembly talk so passionately about any violence against women and girls, so I really, really support and endorse that every child is taught about this.
There is a distinct gap, obviously. We only looked at post-primary schools that were state regulated. Homeschooling we haven't looked at, so I don't really want to speculate, but I suspect that there'll be less prescription there than in state schools. That's a whole other matter on taking a child out of school and home and the quality of the education, that sort of thing. So, but obviously, it's if you accept the logic that a child of a certain age has its own rights, then arguably those rights extend whether it's in being homeschooled, in state school, or in any other school.
Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Thank you so much. I haven't had a chance to read the report yet, just to be brutally honest about it, but I have skin in the game, as the chair had, and a great interest in it from a perspective of children and young people spokesperson, have been for a number of years, and also a parent of quite a few children. And in that regard, so the first thing I'm going to talk about, it says it's a relationship and sexuality education in post-primary, a compelling case for reform, but the only thing we've talked about today so far is in around abortion. Either the right or not to avail of what is termed scientifically accurate and so on. And then you've alluded to, Alison, that would probably be the more critical centre of debate, what is scientifically accurate. So my first question would be in and around the opt-out. We talked about the parental part of that, but what about student opt-out? 3 or 4. So education is compulsory, but what would be the NIHR's position on pupils opting out?
It depends on capacity to start with.
So Key Stage 3.
You're going to have to remind me what that is. What
14,
age?
14, 15,
14,
16,
15,
yeah. And just for whatever reasons decide that that's the part that they want to opt out of. Bear in mind that the rights of the child are central to every part of this debate. For whatever reason, they want to opt out of that part.
A child can't opt out of education.
But can they opt out? So they can choose their subjects in year, which was 8, 9, 10. They choose their subjects in 10, decide what they want to be taught. So they have a voice in what they want to be educated in. Why would the state decide at that point that they're going to determine that this is the bit that you're not going to miss?
Well, the state has determined what the minimum content should be across schools, state-sponsored schools. So a child cannot dictate beyond that.
Oh, okay, right. So that's interesting. Yep.
Well, if you know differently,
I think it's
tell me, because
an interesting thing to put out.
A child, there is a minimum content order which specifies what a school should teach. A child attending a school will be taught that. You have to look at the opt-out, the reason for the opt-out, the age of the child, what the parents' views are. So, I mean, all of this comes back to it's not the state dictating.
But it is, because it dictates the curriculum. It dictates.
Well, in the same way,
it dictates. It does. It absolutely does. Often, it 100% dictates the. And I'm not saying I'm against it. By the way, I think it should be there, and people should have the information. But I also fundamentally believe that a child of that capacity should have the right to opt out if they want to.
I think we're at cross purposes. I'm not saying they don't have a right to opt out of some forms of education. What I'm saying is, as a general principle,
the specific element of
as a general, you have to start from general principles. So, as a general principle, a child does not have a right to opt out of education.
Yet many do.
Okay.
That's okay. That's fine. On this, in the wider sense of the report, there's another issue, because I'm going to move away from that because we'll probably want to lock horns with you on that one. Gender mutilation. Is that something that the Human Rights Commission are aware of, have done any work in? Because I'm thinking of those kids, because we have a much broader suite of pupils that come into their schools, which is brilliant. And unfortunately, a lot of those, or not a lot, but many of those pupils are faced at the very start of their lives with a disadvantage. Has the Commission devised a way of tackling that and ensuring in a revised RSE curriculum that it's dealt with sensibly and actually getting upstream and trying to prevent that from happening. Sorry to go right totally
No,
left field on this one, but
Sorry, you
I'd say
want
it
to?
would need to be a brief response on this one, Colin, just to give us time to get ready.
Can I just say one thing though? The Commission will say that it is a human rights violation to injure a child.
yeah.
This is where the balance between faith and a child's rights come in. But I'm going to let Colin answer the.
So it's at 5.1.13 of our report where we highlight the need for female genital mutilation to be included in the curriculum. And I think that brings us back to a more general point that the regulations have made changes in relation to termination of pregnancy and prevention of early pregnancy, but the whole scope of other issues that we discuss in our report haven't been addressed by way of that amendment. So we're keen to pick up the debate in relation to issues like consent, violence against women, female genital mutilation, and the range of other topics that have been highlighted.
Is there anything, and this is there any way we can get ahead of that in terms of the education piece? Because it seems
Very, very briefly, and we will have to move on to the next member.
it's too late to give information.
Sorry, Robbie, I'd said to Colin to move on briefly, so Colin.
It is illegal.
It is legal, okay.
Yeah. So that's as about as upstream as you can get. It's a criminal offence to injure a child in that way within this jurisdiction.
I'll chase that myself, thank you. In terms of just what's happening behind the scenes in regard to the reports
Whether or not all parents are complying with it, that's another issue, and that's something that I think somebody else is better equipped to monitor. But as a principle of human rights compliance, we agree it should not be. It's not something that is human rights compliant.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I mean, I want to just put out at this stage that I think when it comes to RSE, I would certainly want to be careful about setting RSE exclusively as something very, very different from all the rest of the curriculum. I think just from the last exchange, my feeling would be that we are comfortable with the state dictating to an extent. I think the phrase dictated in terms of what a child should learn to be prepared for the world of life and work, and I think in terms of protecting their own safety, that this would sit in that space. So it's on.
I think it veers though into elements of morality and faith that are usually set in the home, whereas other traditional parts of our education, if you're learning French, you're learning maths, you're learning English, it's preparing you for the world of work. And
it's just unusual to hear about encouraging students to opt out of education was an unusual angle in this committee.
I don't accept that. I don't think it's a good analysis, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. But I think we maybe need to ensure that we don't separate RSE out as an exclusive separate thing. That it's part of the whole curriculum. And I think that's probably.
I think just to that's a really important point. It's not religious education, for example. We don't go near that. We do say there is scope for ethos within schools. We allow for that. And rather than some of the findings of the experts maybe, what I would ask you to maybe draw attention to is our recommendations and our findings, which are not prescriptive at all. So we say there are certain things that should be looked at, but schools should be consulted, parents should be consulted. So we agree with you in that sense before this guidance is drawn up. So we're not saying we know the answers to this or we know what children should be taught, but what we're saying is there is no consistency. The minimum standards do not appear to have been reached, and that to protect children for their own sake, they need to be reached. But let other people, having discussed it with schools, train teachers properly, get external providers if necessary, listen to teachers and pupils and parents, but others are placed to do that, so ETNI can do that.
Cheryl, you had indicated?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for what you've said so far. Just in terms of teacher training and education providers, it's just a touch base. Were they consulted within this? The likes of Stranmillis or St Mary's, had they been involved in this process?
Yes.
So they have fed into that as well, both?
They were contacted in relation to the investigation and would have been highlighted at the time whenever we were drafting the recommendations.
And they have fed in their responses they were contacted, yeah?
We're certainly contacted. I'll check on.
We'd have to check on exactly how they responded, but they all responded.
Yeah, no, that would be great to know. And just, you slightly touched on it there, just in terms of the ethos of the school. So how exactly could that be, how is that taken into account, I suppose, within the consultation? How do you see that, the ethos of the school being incorporated into this moving forward?
We don't, and we don't say in the report. We don't claim to know the answer to that. What we say is there are other people better placed, having considered all the factors, talk to parents, children, all the people that you say we should have consulted. We say that's for somebody else to consult. And before you conclude on this, do those consultations. There is scope for it, but the sort of the objective test is really that it can't be to such an extent that it undermines the basic right to education. So it can't be you can't say something in RSE which is scientifically accurate and then in RE say something which is wholly inaccurate. But there is space for ethos, of course there is. And we say that, we respect that in our report. So rather than, I think some of in this report focus on paragraphs of some of the research, but I would ask you to look at our recommendations, and particularly where we don't go with the recommendations. We say, you know, there's still more work to do. This needs to be thought through. Better people, better educators and scientists and etc. are able to do that. So there is a role for ethos, but not to the exclusion of a child's rights.
And how would that incorporate? I'm just thinking, you know, Northern Ireland is extremely diverse now, and we have a lot of newcomer children, we have a lot of children for different ethnic minorities. How would that be? And I know and I appreciate you don't potentially have the answer today, but how is that integrated going forward, that we respect and we acknowledge the various different elements of religion within the RSE?
That, in some ways, that's the beauty of having scientifically accurate, comprehensive RSE across schools, is that it's the same for everybody. So the scientifically accurate information that's given should not differ depending on the religious belief. What may differ is their attitude to, for example, abortion, attitude to prevention of early pregnancy on faith grounds, but it shouldn't affect the scientifically accurate information that's given to children. That's going to be the same whether it's a Muslim family, a Christian family, a Jewish family.
And just in terms of what the scope of your organisation, you just discussed about the minimum content, obviously, of RSE, and it's not standardised. It was also highlighted in the likes of the independent review about physical education not being standardised, and children are not receiving that across Northern Ireland. Is that something that has flagged with yourselves? Are you looking at that? Is that an area of concern as well?
There's only so much we can do. We were asked to do this work by the Secretary of State initially, but led by CEDAW making a recommendation and a finding. So we follow where a recommendation or a request comes. If you asked us, is there more that needs to be done in relation to all sorts of areas of education, I'd say yes. But that's not, we're looking at human rights standards, and there was a case for an investigation here because somebody else had told us it didn't meet standards, and we were asked to look into it.
Okay.
No other indications that Michelle's indicating yet?
This is your maiden question.
No interventions from
no interventions.
It's a really quick one, I think, anyway. The report references external providers. What is your view on the fact that 94% of the schools that you spoke to use external providers? Do you think that has any impact on the quality of the RSE that's being provided? Do you have any concerns about the use of external providers, and did you talk to them as part of this process?
I'm going to let Colin deal with some of the detail of that, because he commissioned, you were involved in speaking to them, but what I would say is that we don't find against external provision, but ideally it should be the teachers who are seeing the children on a daily basis, who know the children, who know the parents, who know the school's ethos, who should be delivering this. They can be assisted by external providers. In the short term, we see more of a case for external provision because teachers were telling the researchers that they just didn't feel they had the knowledge or ability to do it. There is a difficulty, I think, if there is one or two specific external providers who dictate, much in the same way objection may be made to the state dictating, who dictate the content of RSE. So you have to look at it. It has to be what is delivered to the children. If that's external, so be it. But we would say equip the teachers who are there and know the children and the parents, and they should be able to do it and give them support and training to do it. And Colin can ask the specific one, yeah.
Our view would be that the school needs to be the permanent supportive presence for the teaching of RSE. Research demonstrates that pupils respond best whenever they're taught RSE from a teacher who they know and have confidence within. So we would be concerned if external providers were being used as a substitute for the school providing that. But in our report and recommendations, we mentioned it could be an add-on, but ultimately it's the school who's the public authority that have been commissioned to provide these services to school children. I think actually the circular submitted by the Department of Education is largely in line with that view.
Thank you.
Other indications? I don't think I've missed anybody. No. So thank you for presenting to us today, and it is right at the outset of our inquiry, so you have the privilege of getting in first, and look, we really do appreciate your time today, and also I think all members will want to digest that report in full, and it will absolutely be a key one that informs our deliberations on this going forward. So thank you.
We do appreciate the opportunity and for listening to us, and we're here to answer any further questions if necessary, and we'll obviously share any further work we do.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So the next set of witnesses are here. I'm going to, unless any members have a different view, I'm going to assume for all of these evidence sessions that there's unlikely to be substantial matters arising, other than for the clerk and the team to take an accurate record of that to inform deliberations around any future report. I will still give everyone the opportunity. Is there anything else in particular that they feel we need to go back to the Human Rights Commission on, if there is more information that anybody wishes to seek from them? Any further clarifications, again, can go back through myself or the clerk if there is anything that anyone does want to raise.
I mean, I just have one note about the how the teacher training institutions responded to the Human Rights Commission exercise. But if there's anyone has anything else, do email me and I'll follow up. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, item 7 is our next evidence session in the inquiry, and that is an oral briefing from the Department of Education and the Education and Training Inspectorate. So a couple of papers to refer members to. There is the report to into the preventative curriculum in schools and education other than at school centres, and that's at page 137. And there was also a further briefing paper submitted, which is in your tabled papers from ETI. So while the witnesses are just getting seated, we'll let them get settled, and then I'll do introductions. Good afternoon. You're all very welcome here today. So thank you for giving up your time and for agreeing to give evidence to the committee on the RSE inquiry. So I'll do a quick introduction. I think most of you will be familiar to the committee, but we have Lindsay Farrell, Deputy Secretary in Education Policy and Children's Services at the department. We have Sam Dempster, Head of Curriculum Policy within the department. We have Elaine McAllister, the Managing Inspector from ETI, and Fionnuala McCann, the Managing Inspector in Early Years and Safeguarding in the ETI. So you're all very welcome. We have had some papers received from you, so that is appreciated, and we thank you for that. We'll be handing over to you for a presentation of up to 10 minutes. We are really tight on time in these briefings, so they will be shorter than a normal evidence hearing might be. So we're in and around 30 minutes is the time slot. So I'd say a presentation of up to 10 minutes, and then we'll move on to question and answer from there. And that's just so we can get through the evidence sessions. So probably there's nothing more for me to say other than to hand over. We're looking forward to getting really a sense of an overview of where we are at the moment in the system, both from an inspection and from a departmental policy position. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really welcome the opportunity to provide some opening remarks to the committee today, together with my colleague Sam from the department and colleagues from the Education and Training Inspectorate. So I hope that the written briefing that we provided will help the committee in its consideration of this issue, and I will try to keep my opening remarks as brief as possible. So the committee will know that the department provided a briefing in relation to the changes made by the Secretary of State and the department's regulations in relation to the circumstances in which a parent can request that a pupil may be excused from specific aspects of the RSE curriculum. In line with the requirements of the Secretary of State's regulations, the department also published guidance by the 1st of January this year. The committee will be aware that the curriculum is designed to be broad and balanced. While there appears to be a current focus on RSE being the only way that people can be prepared for the adult world, the department would contend that mathematical and languages skills, together with an understanding of science and technology, are as important. The department has been developing wider RSE guidance for schools to consolidate the information which has previously been provided and to address the findings of the Inspectorate's thematic evaluation of the preventative curriculum, as well as responding to the Human Rights Commission report into RSE. I understand the Commission has also been presenting to the committee today. Throughout June, the department consulted with a broad range of stakeholders on the proposed content of the guidance. It was interesting that for the young people we met, the key issue was having respectful relationships, and I think given recent events, this is more important now than ever before. But they also want education in those wider skills that I've already mentioned. We met with the Education Committee of the Youth Assembly on the 30th of August and discussed the wider Learning for Life and Work area of learning. And the young people we engaged with were more interested in human rights and citizenship, careers and financial literacy than RSE. The guidance is intended to support schools as they evaluate, develop and deliver RSE provision to meet the needs of their pupils across all key stages. Subject to ministerial approval, that guidance will be issued to schools in the autumn. The guidance is designed to be agile and will remain under review and can be updated and reissued if required. We know that while there are examples of good practice, as there should be across all areas of learning, there is also variation in the effectiveness and range of approaches across schools. So we need to support our teachers and build their confidence and competence in order to address issues which can be sensitive to them. This includes being supported by boards of governors, who in turn need to be supported by our colleagues in the Education Authority, and I know the EA is also presenting to the committee today. The growing use of social media and the implications for online safety, as well as learning about consent, set the context for why it is so important to consult pupils on the content, relevance and delivery of the RSE curriculum. This is an increasing concern as young people have easy access in their lives to smartphones or other devices. It is important that the flexibility in our curriculum is not lost by an overly prescriptive approach, which in itself may not guarantee high quality teaching and learning, and that knowledge and understanding are not confused with content. The challenge therefore remains to provide a curriculum which continues to engage with young people and reflects their views. The committee will have received separate briefing from colleagues in CCEA about how it continues to support curriculum delivery through its RSE hub and an RSE progression framework which was launched last year. Supporting young people to build healthy relationships that respect diversity and self-esteem is vital. The department remains a key partner in support of the Executive Office's strategy on ending violence against women and girls. Officials also attend the Gillen Implementation Review Group chaired by the Department of Justice. So there is significant work being taken forward in the department in relation to RSE. I want to reinforce the importance of ensuring young people are supported to develop the skills and knowledge required to cope with life as a young adult. I hope the committee found the summary of the findings from ETI's thematic evaluation helpful in the written paper for today's session, which you may recall was also included as part of the wider inspection briefing paper for the committee back in June. The evaluation highlights the actions needed to ensure that children are receiving a high-quality curriculum offer for relationships and sexuality education, which reflects the range of issues facing children and young people today, and that all young people are equipped with the knowledge and skills to be able to take informed decisions. While I do not want to go into detail at this point, we would highlight that schools and centres should be able to, with support, provide pupils with access to a well-planned, creative, progressive and responsive programme of learning across the preventative curriculum, which is integrated seamlessly into the existing curriculum offer. Thank you, and very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and I appreciate you keeping well under time there, and so we have plenty of time for members' questions. That is appreciated. I'll just begin by just picking up on the ETI and the report specifically into the preventative curriculum, and it set out quite a range of different issues that arose in that. My understanding was there was a task and finish group set up. Did that ever report back in terms of how maybe the department could begin to implement some of that? What was the conclusion on that?
There's been a task and finish group, and Sam can pick up on the detail around this, but I think that has been critical in informing the guidance that I referred to in my opening remarks. But
the key piece of work for the task and finish group was to develop the guidance which we plan to issue this year. So A lot of that work has already been completed, and it's with senior management at the moment, and then we'll engage with the Minister in terms of the guidance. Once that's agreed by the Minister, we'll certainly share it with the committee.
So that works very well progressed
very
then in
much
terms of really moving that report on to the next stage of how we implement some of the
I
recommendations.
think the department really valued that report, because I think it was something like 14,000 young people that were involved in the engagement with that. So it was really important, because that was a key mechanism for us in terms of getting those views from young people. But not sure if colleagues in ETI want to add anything to that.
No, I mean, I think it has been it's been well informed by the views, as we've said before, of young people, and with 14,500 of them, half of those primary and half post-primary. So we had the full age range across that as well, and the voice of young people were speaking very clearly about what they want in their preventative curriculum, which is actually wider than RSE, but RSE was a vital part of it, and they were quite vocal about RSE.
Yeah, and that will be a key feature of the guidance. We will expect schools to engage actively with young people, but not only engage with them, reflect their views back in their policy and top programme. So,
if I could then ask on that, because I think you had highlighted, Lindsay, in your comments that really there is definitely work to be done to support schools to respond to the needs of the young people that are receiving the education, and to respond to some of those concerns that teachers directly raised with the ETI, that they don't feel confident in many cases or equipped to deliver this curriculum. So can you give us any sense of where you think that or what you think the best method of supporting schools and teachers, and I would widen it out even to boards of governors, to actually develop good policies, because there's a lot to navigate here. There's a lot to navigate in terms of we had quite a detailed discussion around opt-outs in the last session, around just actually developing policies that are fit for purpose. Really good, meaningful engagement with parents so that they are involved and understand the curriculum that's being developed, and listening to young people. So there are layers of complexity that you don't get with other aspects of the curriculum. So have you got a sense of where you think the support is needed and what that might look like?
Thank you, Chair. I think the key theme, as has come out with other evaluations that colleagues in ETI have taken forward, has been that of teacher confidence, and the sense that they don't feel at this current time confident and equipped around RSE. It's something that has come up at committee briefings before in terms of investment in teacher professional learning, and that sense from teachers that they need that continuous framework and that programme of ongoing teacher professional learning and investment in them as a profession. So I think there's certainly something that the department is looking at already through its school improvement end-to-end review in terms of that teacher education and teacher professional learning piece. You mentioned Board of Governors there, and obviously they do play a key role in terms of RSE policies, and there's a need to build their confidence and their skills around that as well, and that's where EA would have a particular role in terms of the rollout to training to governors. But I also think there's an important piece here around amplifying and sharing good practice, because no doubt while we recognise there's work to do, we also know from the work being carried forward by colleagues in ETI that there are a lot of really great examples of what good looks like. So I think there is something about sharing that practice which will build confidence across schools, and maybe colleagues from ETI would want to comment on that point.
Go ahead. In terms of the RSE policy, that is a statutory duty that lies with the Board of Governors and the principals. So where we see that done effectively, it does have that consultation with parents, with the governors and with those pupils, and that it's really up to them to see what is the progression within that delivery across the school, so that those experiences have breadth, and that a broad and balanced curriculum is in fact what they receive. Also, as part of our evaluation, 96% of the schools did say that they were continually refreshing that, and it had been updated in the last 2 years. But I suppose sitting alongside that with what Elaine discussed in terms of the preventative curriculum, just over a quarter of them weren't reviewing that to the same extent, and that's a delivery area that needs to go hand in hand with the RSE. from SG.
No, when it comes to good practice as well, I mean, when we had our dissemination event, we had 2 schools that were actually standing up to, you know, to talk about the practice in their school, how they had developed their whole preventative curriculum. An important part of that was RSE. And going forward in ETI as well, you know, part of our inspection models going forward is about highlighting and disseminating good practice, and we'll be identifying within reports which good practice should be disseminated further across the system.
No, that's great. I just had one other question, and I'll bring it out on to other members. It was really just to pick up on some of the conversations we had just around opt-outs, and I think it was very clear from the last session that it is a really complex area, and it's not straightforward, and there's just a lot of different rights and interests that are intersecting all through the process. So I think we need to be really clear as a committee that it is not straightforward to navigate, and particularly for school leaders when they're faced with these issues. In terms of the specific provisions that were put in for the new minimum content that came in the regulations earlier in the year, one of the things that was highlighted is in terms of at year 12, there is the provision around a slightly different standard being applied, that the young person must not object to the opt-out. And I just wanted to get a sense, do you think there's enough space in that process to hear from the young person in that, in terms of the guidance that came through from the department? I know there is a pro forma letter that a parent can send through indicating the areas they wish an opt-out, and then they can indicate that the child doesn't, or the young person doesn't object. Is there more can be done just to make sure that we're balancing rights, that the child's voice is heard?
Again, Sam will want to come in this point. I think there's been a huge amount of work done. As you point out, it is balancing parental rights with child's rights, and I know the team spent a lot of time around that point.
Yeah, and it will be reflected in the revised guidance that we're sending out. So we're taking the opportunity to reinforce that message. The reason why we chose year 12 is in and around curricular competence, where if you're 16 or above, you're taken as being competent to make your own decisions unless there's evidence to the contrary. That's not to say that younger people can't also object, but there needs to be some sort of assessment done in terms of their competence to make that call.
Will the guidance provide some, well, I suppose guidance, but I suppose will there be additional provision to support schools, because these are difficult decisions, you know, assessing the level of competence to make those decisions, and you don't want to be pitting a parent against their own child. It all becoming as a school and a board of governors, that could become, you know, really complex.
It is something we can take away and look at, and if we need to strengthen it, we can certainly look at that.
Certainly take that.
I think schools and boards of governors would welcome that, and I think parents would welcome that in terms of feeding the. Nobody wants a tick box exercise of just what, you know, the parents spoken and then nobody goes any further. I think it'd be good practice for schools to open up a conversation at that stage, to bring the young person in, and that would feel like good practice to me, and maybe schools can be.
Absolutely. I mean, as you said in remarks, I mean, we want the guidance to be agile and reflect what's happening on the ground, so we can update it as necessary and reissue. So we will.
And I think that type of point comes back to the teacher confidence piece as well, which is a key point. And as you rightly said, Chair, these issues are complex. They're not straightforward. So I think even as we continue to consider around the teacher professional learning and where teachers require that support, I think that would be one of the aspects that we would certainly be engaging with teachers around to understand better how they even manage those processes in terms of engagement with parents and engagement with the young people.
Thank you. I don't want to hog any more time. Deputy Chair, have you anything you want to comment?
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. The Chief Commissioner of Human Rights was speaking just before you came in there, and she was saying that in some instances, in terms of the delivery of RSE, minimum standards weren't being met. So what are officials doing to make sure that the RSE curriculum is delivered consistently across all schools? And just an add-on to that, I know we've talked about providing extra support for teachers and so on who don't feel they're capable of delivering this. Has there been any actual resistance from any teachers or schools in regard to delivering it?
Yeah, so Sam, do you want to pick up the first point and I can come back on the second?
In terms, I mean, we will be covering that in the guidance again in terms of reinforcing the message to schools that they should be delivering at least the very minimum content. But we've also provided this time, for the first time, we've mapped across in the curriculum where very sensitive subjects can be taught, you know, so it provides the context where it can be taught to help schools and sort of navigate through that.
Chair, do you want to come back?
Well, I suppose I'm going to bring ETI in on this as well, because, and you mentioned it in your opening presentation there, in terms of the 23 evaluation by ETI, it highlighted considerable variation in the effectiveness and range of approaches taken by schools in delivering RSE. So I suppose this has to be a joint effort by the department and ETI. And I suppose, how are ETI going to evaluate the effectiveness and consistency of the delivery of RSE, given the evaluation that you've already produced in regard to 2023?
Well, we provided the committee with an update on our development of inspection approaches in June, and we now have a full programme of inspections scheduled. We're delighted for this academic year, now that Action Short of Strike has ended. And the first inspections actually will begin on Monday. But our new Empowering Improvement framework for inspection was published and is now on our website. And we're going to be able to monitor RSE as part of one of the core areas of curriculum for all and health, wellbeing and keeping safe. Those are two of the 4 core areas that will be part of all inspections. The framework also sets out indicators of effective practice for each of those 9 core areas, and schools can use those as well as self-evaluation tools to reflect on the practice there. But in health, wellbeing and keeping safe, there is actually a specific reference to RSE about the provision. In the effective practice, the provision for relationships and sexuality education includes age and stage appropriate content and scientifically accurate information. And as well as that, we look at the school policies for RSE, and we'll observe lessons and in any sort of related areas of the curriculum. We'll ensure also that the provision and the planning for the whole preventative curriculum RSE is age and stage appropriate. We report objectively on what we find, and we do tend, as you said, to find that there is a variety of the quality out there, but we will challenge when the provision is not good enough. Parents, young people and staff, now another change in our processes going forward is they've an opportunity to complete a confidential questionnaire, and we've reviewed the questions in that. So those questions for each, I've got examples here. A parent will be able to comment, I am content with the RSE education provided by this school. For primary 7 pupils, I receive helpful information about the changes that will happen to me as I grow up and develop. For our teachers, I have sufficient training and support to deliver the preventative curriculum well. For years 8, 9 and 10, my school provides relationships and sexuality education, which I find useful. And for years 11, 12 and 13, my school provides relationships and sexuality education, which I find useful in helping me make informed and responsible choices. So as we now engage in a full inspection programme, and we have the answers for those questionnaires coming in from every inspection, after a period of time, we will be able to monitor the answers to those questions and give us some system-wide data on how well things are going, as well as within individual schools. We also have widened our engagement with young people during inspection. We now meet with years 3, 5 and 7 in primary school, and a larger groupings of pupils in post-primary school as well. And those conversations give us opportunities to explore with the young people, especially anything they've put back in written comments on our questionnaires, to find out what it's like in their school, and to find out how respectful the relationships are within their school for all types of people. So going forward, we feel we will be in a good position to report on what's going on in the system and see hopefully things improve.
And just in terms then of the other part of the question, in terms of resistance from schools or from individual teachers, how will that be dealt with by 1, the department, and 2, ETI?
And just in response to that point, Pat, yes, certainly when we were engaging with schools around, for example, the Secretary of State's changes to legislation, it was clear that there was a nervousness among some schools and a concern among some teachers, I suppose for a variety of reasons around the changes that were being brought. But what became clear was that those schools that demonstrated really effective practice were those that were able to manage that internally within their school. So again, I think there's a core piece around building that confidence around how this can be managed within a way that fits the context of the school, the ethos of the school, and where schools have done that before. Certainly the event that colleagues were talking about, where there was that sharing of good practice, they spoke very openly of how they had to deal with staff with differing views on these issues as well, and so that would be a core piece of it. But just back to that previous point you made as well, Pat, I think inspection is going to be a key aspect that has been missing for us around quality assurance at a system level. But you'll also know that the department is required to report to the Assembly in respect to the specific changes made by the Secretary of State. So that report will be led at the Assembly by the 1st of September 2026. So work is currently ongoing to develop a questionnaire for schools to help inform that report back. Now I know that's specifically linked to the Secretary of State's changes, but within that we would also want to be understanding how schools are approaching the development of their RSE policy, so that will be another key piece in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy
Can I just add one point? We've been working with CCEA also to develop exemplars, so they've got 3 developed at the moment, which they hope to publish on their RSE hub quite soon. So there's one post-primary, one primary, one special school, and they're going to develop more for us. So those are examples of very good practice. So.
I can just add as well, from our evaluation, we did send out questionnaires to 509 schools and centres who completed. Within the additional written comments, there was nothing around the teaching or an aspect that they didn't want to. It was largely around the confidence and the TPL that goes to support that. So it's very difficult to separate that part out from the minimum content of delivery. They are wanting to be increasing their confidence to deliver and give the children factual information and facilitate those discussions, which is an important part of the learning.
Danny, you had indicated next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm just wondering, we'll go back to the views of our young people. Just if you can elaborate on some of the findings of what's came forward, because no matter what engagement I'm at, whether it's at the youth club or whether it's Belfast City Councillor, when I was on People and Communities, and even myself and Robbie go to a lot of the youth assembly, the kids are very vocal about a couple of main, I suppose, subjects, and that would be mental health, RSE, and particularly around that, there the teachings and what they would like to see in the curriculum would be the rates of LGBTQ plus children as well. So that side of it. So just, I know it's in the report, just want you to elaborate on some of the views that came forward.
I'll give a bit and then you come in, Neil, afterwards. But one of the things that came across on views from young people were that when those discussions in class aren't handled badly, you end up with a young person who feels that their sexuality is being discussed and may not, and that's where we're talking about teachers feeling they didn't have the skills to know how to handle the situation. What young people told us very clearly they wanted was that preventative curriculum in the round delivered across the curriculum. They wanted it across subject, they didn't want it standalone, but they wanted it normalised, and they wanted to have a safe space where they could have that scientifically accurate knowledge with teachers who were confident. Some of them said, I don't want my teacher standing nervous at the top of the class, handing out worksheets and not willing to talk about this. They wanted their teachers to actually be able to talk to them normally and normalise it for them. And that was huge for them, and that came across very strongly. And I think, do you want to add any more?
I suppose, we took the views of primary and post-primary, and some of the primary children did want to know more about gender and identity. That was the P7 children who largely filled in the evaluation for us. And then post-primary, it was issues around consent, and CSE in particular came through as quite strong themes. But as Elaine said, it is around the discussion. They really want to be active, and they want to have their views, I suppose, sought by the school and heard. But we know that that's only happening for 50% of pupils, which is a concern. And there's a credibility issue in that if we're saying education is for children and young people, to then not listen to their views of what that education is like and their experience of it seems to maybe shortchange them a bit.
That gets fed in quite regularly. Thank you.
I would say also the engagement we had with young people over the summer, they were more interested in having healthy, happy relationships rather than the sexuality bit, and they felt that what they were saying to us was if they have those happy relationships, the sexuality bit almost looks after itself because it's no longer an issue for them. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Thank you. David, you were next.
Thanks, Chair. I've probably heard plenty already through different elements of what's been questioned here already on what I was going to ask, but I'll maybe ask you to reflect on the methodology, the positives of it, and what you think maybe could be learned in the future. And the reason I do that is because we put quite a focus on this committee in listening to the young people's voice and allowing it to influence policy. And we'll probably have differences around the table on the balance to be struck between young people's voice being heard and versus parents, schools, all of that. But if we are going to hear young people's voice, and I've had discussion with some members of the Youth Assembly and so on, it's important we are hearing young people's voices and being reflected accurately as a representation of their generation in a way that I don't always feel that the organisations that we engage with necessarily are. And I say that as someone who would have probably been quite keen to be involved in something like the Youth Assembly or so on, but these are already people who are very politically engaged, very strongly opinionated, and in my experience, even from growing up myself, but also with relatives and so on, that doesn't reflect all members of that generation. And so the methodology here, and because of the nature of the department and schools and so on, allows you to really do that kind of work where you're getting a much broader view and engage with many more young people from a variety of views, including those that really need more proactive effort to involve and to hear from, because if they're just asked whether they want to be involved or not, they'll go, actually, no, that's not for me. You'll leave that to the people who are already pretty engaged. So that's something that worries me when we're trying to listen to the voice, that we're hearing young voices, but we're not hearing the right sort of variety of young voices. And just, I think this is quite a good methodology. Maybe you could talk to what benefits you think it has had for your work, but also maybe how it could be improved in future.
And I'm sure ETI colleagues will want to come in on that, given the focus of the voice of the child and the young person through their work. But I think there is a broader point here in terms of engagement more generally. I think it's always important, no matter what group we're engaging with, we're trying to get as representative a sample as possible. I think with some of the timelines around Secretary of State's changes, for example, there was a pragmatism in terms of trying to engage as broadly and as intensively as possible, but within a very, very tight time scale. But I think there is a broader point for us about having a very inclusive approach to how we do that. And I think that's where the ETI approach, where they're actually getting insights many of us will never have the opportunity to, because they can get access to so many young people, so many schools right across Northern Ireland, which is excellent. But I think it is something that we will reflect on. There's work going on in the department, for example, in terms of how we use the Lundy model, for example, in engagement with children and young people, how we ensure the voice of the child and the young person is informing policy and service delivery. So I think there's issues there for us to reflect on, but I'm sure ETI colleagues will have a lot more to say around that.
Yeah, well, in terms of, our questionnaires was quite large scale with 14,665. That reinforces and really speaks to the need for schools to know their own context and know their own pupils who are going to be recipients of that programme. And that's not a hard task in many respects, and to get that representative sample, you're right, its voice can seem to speak to the singular, but there are plurality of identities there that need to be considered. So for me, it is around how they involve the pupils, but equally how they involve parents. And I know from engagement with some of the special school parents, where teachers lack that confidence, they also lack that confidence, and they want to see what that curriculum looks like so that they can support the delivery. So I think, like all things, there is a need for balance and all views, but that is underpinned by a safe space, regardless of ethos, where children feel that they belong, that diversity is accepted, and that there is that inclusive nature. And if that is what it is underpinned by, that can only deliver a positive result for pupils. And again, a key question would be, what is the learning environment like for those pupils, and what is the ethos like in terms of relationships with their teachers, and is there that trust? Because a lot of this is around safeguarding our young people and teaching them protective behaviours, but equally it's much more than physical safety. Our children need to feel emotionally safe and psychologically safe, that they can have these questions with their teachers, and many of them do, and many of our teachers try very well to have the responses. So there's a whole culture actually that needs to be brought into that.
That's one of the things I noted down, is how you make sure whenever you're speaking, you're engaging with kids, you're doing it in a way that they're not being subjected to peer pressure or groupthink because they're sitting beside their friends who maybe think differently or that be seen a certain way. And I think if we're going to engage with young people and use them for policy making, we have to make sure that we're getting it right. It can't be just sort of, as I think we're all guilty of at times, finding the young person that suits us and seeing if they'll say what we want them to say. And yeah, no, I think it is probably the best model in, that I've seen. And as a unionist, the Lundy model will be interesting to look into.
Could you change the word? Yeah. Bring it.
We didn't choose it.
I thought you were talking about you, David.
Moving swiftly.
I'm going to remind them what you said.
I've had this chat with them. We're interested.
I can't wait.
Yes, moving on. Robert, you were next.
Thank you.
And if I could just ask if members could try and get the questions quickly, so we can hear the answers in the fullest way possible.
Some of my stuff has been covered actually, but I'm interested in maybe the committee would be better at refreshing me. But when the Human Rights Commission were in, I felt at one stage they were calling into question the veracity of the size, scale and content of the report that ETI and department. I think I wrote that down. There was a response to one part, but I've never known a response of that scale. 14,500 young people alone, which is quite remarkable. And on a point that Danny had made, would it be possible, and again I don't know if it's within the report, for it to be like an easy pick out, like that, you know, the number one issue, the number two issue, number three, number four, and do it like that and present it like that. Because I think the voice of the young people are going to be really important in this, in regards to if we do get to developing our own minimum content there, to make them comfortable and to maybe debunk and help with the opt-out argument, which potentially at the moment is the most difficult argument to have. I suppose it's the one that we keep coming back to. But if there's confidence in and around that it does contain the rights, the views of all, because it is the abortion issue is a contentious issue, whether people believe it to be or not, it just is. And the ethos one, I think, Sam, I'm not sure if you want to maybe speak to this. Everybody talks about respect and ethos, but that's okay as long as you respect mine, because we've all got that different, you know, and even within boards of governors, within schools, there's a wrestle. So a school, even to have its own single ethos, I'm not sure it even exists, because you kind of get those battles in there. Is there a way of truncating the whole thing? I think it is the voice of the young people and helping them, ensuring it as much as possible to mitigate the amount of difficulties will be in the opt-out, particularly in that key stage 3 and 4. When we get that minimum content of the Secretary of State.
The opt-out is very specific to the Secretary of State's changes. There seems to be a myth out there that there's a general opt-out for schools or for parents, and that's not the case. The statutory opt-out refers simply to the changes made by the Secretary of State. Now, we are aware that there may be local arrangements where parents might opt out of certain classes, but there's no general opt-out of RSE.
No, I know that. So, and this is a point I got to perhaps with the chair, that the voice of the child seems to be important in every realm and facet of life across the board.
Yeah, 100%.
Where it's important up to a point where maybe it's not important in this, on an issue like abortion. And the position of the human rights is if it's in the minimum content, the child shouldn't be allowed to opt out.
I think that's where the flexibility in the curriculum is so helpful for us, because we can react to what people tell us they want. And if you go into a typical class of 30 kids in a post-primary school, you're going to have a whole range of views and backgrounds and ethnicity and everything. So it is important that the curriculum is flexible and can reflect that, which is why we don't want to over-prescribe content.
How close is CCEA to, you talked about 3 exemplars possibly, is that including, is that going to include lesson plans and or is that?
They already have that.
They already
have those on their RSE hub.
They developed their progression framework and their resources on their RSE hub.
Yeah.
So
I know they're in after us, so they'll be able to expand on that.
And the crucial thing here is to know that it's uniform across Northern Ireland. The difficulty in the past, particularly as Danny pointed out, in around the identity piece, the LGBT, you know, and where young people have suffered horrendously over years because, in some schools it's been handled well, in some schools it hasn't. And I think ETI, in terms of that's going to be your role at the other side of this, to try and promote that, but it's trying to bring people with us as opposed to ETI coming in and...
Yeah, and it is very much, in my view, back to that teacher confidence and building their skills and their confidence around it. All of this has been in the context of quite a protracted period of time where teachers would tell us they have felt a dearth of teacher professional learning and that investment in their skilling up, I suppose, as a profession. So while there's very particular issues around RSE, it's certainly something we hear in relation to other aspects of the curriculum. So I think so many aspects of this point back to building that really strong, confident, well-equipped workforce. And then if that is also being done in tandem with the boards of governors, it's building a resilience and a confidence into the system, so that it doesn't have to come down to ETI coming in and pointing out where there's issues, but actually that schools and teachers and boards of governors are confident and they're fully aware of their responsibilities in legislation, and they feel confident and equipped to actually deliver those.
My final piece is
we need to bring everybody in here.
In regard to this journey with how the Secretary stated, and then there was this deluge of misinformation which was really hard to deal with, and it pitted people against people when they didn't need to be. It was horrible. I get the sense that it's possibly nearly starting again. I get the essence and the feeling that that's kind of there. Is the department aware of anything? Are they concerned about anything? And has that kind of been dealt with? And how will they deal with it going forward to ensure that there is a confidence for parents, pupils and teachers?
We have had some correspondence
Okay.
in and around some of the issues that came up last summer. Nothing to the extent of last summer, where we had 13,500 responses to our consultation. So, but it's always there in the background. You're always very conscious of it.
And I think that misinformation, it was unhelpful at the time, because really conscious that this is a very sensitive area for many people. There's so many views in any one room at any one time. There'd be a variance of views, and that was why the department took the decision at the time to actually write out to schools with a very clear position to try to debunk some of that misinformation that was about. And I think on this one, it's really important that information is clear, and where there is that misinformation, which is really making the debate very unhelpful, that is put to bed. So that was something that the department had dealt with at the time.
Thank you, Chair.
So, Cathy, you'd indicated next time. I'm just going to say I've given a fair bit of latitude for quite long preambles to a lot of the questions here, and it is just meaning that we're then under pressure with getting the answers through and bringing everyone in. So I think I will from here on in just be asking the preambles to be cut so we can get to the question. If we're going to do 3 evidence sessions per meeting on RSE, we'll need to be a bit quicker to get to the questions. So, Cathy, I'll bring you in.
Yes, thank you, and thanks for your presentation. One of the things that the Human Rights Commission mentioned earlier, one of the key words they said was about communication and that misinformation that we've been talking about and how that's key. So just on that, you mentioned about the revised guidance and that's coming out. Clearly this is going to be a difficult one for schools to, revise their policies maybe that are in place at the minute. And we see it with mobile phone policy and stuff going on at the minute. What support is the department planning once that revised guidance comes through? What support will be there for schools to revise their own policy, and I suppose Board of Governors as well, and then in turn that they can communicate that effectively to parents? And then the second one, just quickly as well, in the Human Rights report as well, there's a reference to, I'm talking about children and young people, that children want teachers who have chosen this subject and that they're passionate about this subject, the same way as a maths teacher maybe is passionate about maths and able to teach it, and the question around the external providers. What does the support or what ongoing work is being done there, maybe with the teaching colleges and things like that?
Just on your first point, I think the school leadership is very important here. You mentioned boards of governors, so the Education Authority has a programme for training boards of governors, which covers the entire provision of the curriculum, including RSE. And they're rolling that out, and that was part of the task and finish group that we had established to do that. Support for teachers as well. The EA provides school improvement practitioners who are in and out of school all the time, providing support to school leaders and teachers, and that work will be ongoing, and I think they might be able to expand on that a wee bit later this afternoon whenever they're in here.
And there was the second question from Cathy about who should be delivering this and maybe what young people are asking for in that space.
I think your point, Cathy, about young people wanting a really passionate, enthusiastic teacher, it certainly came through very clearly in those schools that have been used as exemplars and really good practice. I think the leadership in those schools, both said, look, there was already a teacher here who was really confident and passionate about this, and they've really driven it within the school and indeed built the confidence of others. So I think that is a really important point. In terms of external providers, obviously that's an important part of the central tenet of our education system, is that schools have that flexibility to both adapt their curriculum and use whatever resources that suits the context of their school and their children and where their children are at, and that includes bringing in those external providers. But in terms of your point around initial teacher education, is that around ensuring newly qualified teachers are appropriately? And that again is a broader issue, and we have set up a strategic engagement group in the department with the HEIs who deliver the really important initial teacher education. This is certainly an issue I'm more than happy to take away and talk to them about. We have broader conversations with them around SEN, around other issues like this. So I think the teacher confidence one overall, not just in relation to RSE, is a really important one that we should be having with them in terms of how we can best do that in initial teacher education, while recognising that any graduate teacher is by no means the finished article, like any profession, and there'll be that need for that ongoing investment in teacher professional learning to build on that initial education that they've had to qualify as a teacher, as it were.
Thank you. Thanks,
Any other indications? Karen?
Thank you all very much for being here. I just have two questions. One I actually asked the Human Rights Commission was just with regards to children in Northern Ireland who are homeschooled and what reach the department has there with regards to RSE. They had mentioned that every child has a right to learn this education. I'm just mindful for those children because I have spoke with a number of mothers who have actually not been able to secure a school placement for their children, and I do know there's some parents who have pulled their children from school in the meantime while they're seeking a placement. So I'm just wondering what oversight the department would have there, and I respect if you don't have an answer today. But just
I mean, in terms of the children who are homeschooled, I think the Education Authority has a role to play in that. So most parents will register their child with the Education Authority, and they'll provide support. But it's something we can take away and look at and come back to you.
Mindful they might fall through the gaps.
We can take that away and come back to it. And in terms of points of where there's children possibly still waiting for a school placement or where that's being worked through, particularly children with special educational needs, if that is the instance. I know the Education Authority have given us the assurance that there are contingency arrangements in place for those children until they're placed. But again, we can take that away to see would there be specific resources available to support those children while they're not actually in school. That's
great. And then just my last question is just around, I saw in our packs there, it said teachers should enable pupils to develop knowledge, understanding and skills and self-awareness, sense of self, healthy boundaries, challenging scenarios, etc. And I'm just wondering, what does the training for teachers teaching LLW look like? And is it regularly monitored how comfortable or confident that these teachers feel when delivering? Because some of these are quite sensitive topics. I'm just mindful. Can you outline that to us?
So our teachers, they can opt in to study LLW, and some do, and would have a specialism in it. When it's part of maybe discrete provision, again, that would be due to a teacher's passion that they're into that particular area and they want to spread, I suppose, good practice among staff around that preventative curriculum and capacity build. And actually in one of our prior evaluations in 2011, we did say that that's great to have specialists, but actually it can undermine a whole school ethos. So where you have staff who feel suitably trained, that they are, as Lindsay said, capacity building the rest of the staff and the rest of the year group, so that it doesn't reside in one or two individuals within the school. And equally, I might just add, they're all subjects teachers, but they're all teachers of children.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. No, that's me. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Cheers.
Anyone else? No, I think that is us. So thank you all for your time today, and I no doubt we'll be seeing you all in the weeks ahead on a range of issues. So thank you for your time.
Good chair.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, so as with the last session, I'll just check with the clerk. Is there anything particular that we need to pick up on other than getting a full note of that?
Just the one point that I have about is there a gap in regard to homeschool children? Unless anyone has additional points to
clarify?
I think so, not from me. No.
Okay.
How are we in terms of moving on to the next briefing? I appreciate it's very warm in here. If anybody wants to stretch their legs and take a comfort break, we can take 5 minutes in terms of timings if that works for anyone, or we can carry on. Happy to carry on. Okay. That's grand. And if we can bring the next witnesses through, and that would be in your packs, item 8 then, and that's the next evidence session in the inquiry, and that's a briefing from the Education Authority and from the Council for the Curriculum Examinations and Assessment, CCEA. So we'll just wait for the witnesses to come through. So there was a briefing paper from the EA, that's at page 186, and then a briefing paper from CCEA in table papers.
Afternoon.
Afternoon, everybody. We'll get settled. So we have representatives from both CCEA and EA here today. We have John Unsworth, Assistant Director of School Development in the EA, Esther Martin, Business Manager at CCEA, Roisin Radcliffe, Programme Manager at CCEA, and Deirdre Coffey, who is the Education Manager in relation to RSE specifically at CCEA. So you're all very, very welcome here today. I know you had submitted briefing papers, but I'm happy to open up for an initial presentation. But up to 10 minutes, we're quite tight for time, so we're looking at in and around the 30-minute mark for the evidence session. So we obviously want to give members the opportunity to come back with questions as well, but happy to hand over at this stage.
Okay. I'll kick off from the Education Authority. Thanks, Chair. I don't think I'm going to need my 10 minutes. Other colleagues may need more. So look, first of all, on behalf of the Education Authority, we want to thank you for the opportunity to meet with the committee and to provide information that we hope will be of assistance to you in this mini inquiry, as we understand it's going to be. In providing support and guidance to schools on RSE, the Education Authority works in close collaboration with the Department of Education, who've just left, I know, and with our partners bodies, and in particular our colleagues from CCEA, and hopefully that will become obvious as we talk to you this afternoon and as you continue your work. It's very much a partnership, collaborative approach. In relation to RSE provision, the EA has a fairly limited role at present, and it's important just to be absolutely clear about that. As members will be aware, I know under the Local Management of Schools legislation and arrangements, there's substantial autonomy granted and delegated to individual schools on many aspects of their school management and provision, and that is delegated to the Board of Governors and the Principal and staff. And that does have an influence and impact on our role and indeed the role of others in this whole arena, as in many other arenas. So while all schools are required by the Department to have an RSE policy, as you know, individual schools have a fair degree of autonomy as to how they shape that and how they indeed deliver it. And that's similar to other areas of the curriculum as well. So what's the EA role in all of this? Well, the EA has particular responsibilities to provide advice and guidance and indeed training to school boards of governors. We have a particular remit for boards of governors in the controlled sector as their managing authority, but we have wider system-wide responsibilities to all governors really in terms of training. And that's an important responsibility, but it's not one that we're terribly well resourced to fulfil, but again a familiar story to members, I am sure. And in relation to RSE, for example, when new regulations were brought in, as they were earlier this year, we simply remind governors through our training programme and through any individual work with boards of governors of their obligations, of their duties. And in this case, we provided a very short sort of training video overview of what those new responsibilities are. But we do that for a whole range of different duties and responsibilities falling to boards of governors. This is just one example in relation to the RSE. We also have then particular responsibilities in relation to providing advice and guidance to school principals and professional learning and development. And there's some similarities with the approach to the Board of Governors. So whilst the process of developing a policy and identifying teaching materials and resources and so on is very much a matter for schools themselves to make a determination as to what is suitable for their context and their ethos, we have a general duty in relation to supporting professional learning and development. But as I've set out in the briefing paper before, you were very limited in our resources to support that currently for a whole variety of reasons, mostly economic. And currently we don't have any specialist teams or officers with specialist background in RSE, so it's not an area that we're providing any professional learning or development in at present. The rest of the detail is in the paper, Chair, and I'll be happy to respond to questions in due course.
Thank you, John. And from
thank
CCEA,
you.
then, yeah.
On behalf of CCEA, thank you for the opportunity to present evidence to the committee today in relation to RSE. So RSE, or Religious and Sexuality Education, has been included in the Northern Ireland curriculum since before the revised and the current curriculum was introduced in 2007. It's a statutory component of personal development and mutual understanding at the primary phase and in learning for life and work at Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. But the delivery of RSE is not restricted to those specific strands of the curriculum, and there should be many opportunities for a cross-curricular approach to RSE and within the other areas of learning. Effective RSE supports the aim and objectives of the Northern Ireland curriculum to empower our young people to achieve their potential, to make informed and responsible decisions throughout their lives by providing learning opportunities to develop as individuals and contributors to society. We have taken a values and a rights-based approach to our work and to our development programme and considering the rights of every child and every young person in that development work. RSE empowers young people to explore, develop and understand their own personal values. These values determine our boundaries, our priorities, they guide our decision making and help shape how we think, act and feel. They also have a lot of influence on how we interact with other people and important consideration when we're looking to start relationships. So additionally, effective RSE provides children and young people with age-appropriate opportunities to explore and nurture positive values and attitudes towards relationships, love, sexual and reproductive health, and to develop their self-esteem and respect for human rights in a safe and a controlled environment. It contributes to the formation of a fair and compassionate society by empowering individuals and communities, promoting critical thinking skills and strengthening young people's understanding of sometimes sensitive or controversial issues. So really at the heart of the Northern Ireland curriculum. CCEA have always provided a level of support and guidance around the delivery of RSE, but since 2018 there has been a more comprehensive programme of development work undertaken in response to a commission received by the Department of Education to develop the RSE Hub. My colleagues Roisin and Deirdre are going to provide some detail and explain a little bit more about the statutory curriculum for RSE, our development programme, our stakeholder engagement and our plans for this year. So thank you, and I'll pass it to Roisin.
Thank you, Esther, and thank you for the opportunity to present evidence today. In the paper, we've outlined what the statutory curriculum is, and I just, without reading through all of it, I just want to give a bit of an overview. So obviously it's linked to one of our key objectives, which is to develop young people as individuals and also as contributors to society. So it demarcates from the very beginning. When a child enters foundation education, obviously they're emerging from their home environment into a much wider world. And even in the early stages of foundation, the focus is really on encouraging the child to appreciate the world around them, the people around them, and begin to build healthy ways of navigating that world. So even at foundation, there are key themes which are running through, which are statutory within the curriculum. And in particular, they are personal understanding and health. And for example, in foundation, that would include things like being able to explore themselves and their personal attributes. And the thinking there is that they begin to become aware of their value as a person, even though they're very young, and they interact with other young children. They can appreciate how people come together and begin to relate to each other and to develop relationships. So they're considering things like feelings and emotions and the importance of keeping healthy and how to keep safe in both familiar and unfamiliar settings. So that really begins the progression pathway through school from foundation right up to Key Stage 4. And the same themes continue. For example, we have mutual understanding in the local and wider community. So initially they have their family, and then they go beyond that to their classroom, to their playmates, and to the wider children, and how to respond to people within that kind of setting. So as they mature through foundation, they begin to learn routines and how to express themselves, how to ask, how to manners, all of those sort of things. That begins the relationship development. That's picked up and continued again in Key Stage 1 and 2, where once again the focus is on developing the self-esteem and self-confidence of the child, allowing them to express emotion and enabling them to relate once again in a much more effective way than they would when, say, they're 2 or younger. And then in Key Stage 3, Key Stage 2, that continues again. Obviously the child, as they mature, they can explore more complex emotions. They can share experiences with other children, and with that comes further understanding of their role in the world and as they know it, which is in the school setting and the wider community. That includes things like initiating and developing and sustaining mutually satisfying relationships. They begin to make friends that they can rely on. They can understand loyalty, human rights, social responsibility, and their role within, albeit still quite a restricted setting. They begin to understand causes of conflict and appropriate responses, and learn to value cultural difference and diversity, and playing an active and meaningful role in the life of that school community and beyond. Now, Key Stage 3, which is really the age group 11 to 14, they're moving out of the junior phase into a post-primary phase where they begin to learn about key concepts which are relevant at that particular key stage as they begin to mature into teenagers and onwards into adult life. So within the Key Stage 3, RSC rests within learning for life and work. And within that there are key concepts. The main ones are self-awareness, personal health, and within that the pupils have an opportunity to explore the sense of self, which is really important in developing their sense of self-worth, their attitudes, their opinions, and being able to, I suppose, share those with other children of their own age and see where the differences lie, and to investigate the influences that surround them at that key stage. In terms of personal health, they also begin to consider the development of the health of the whole person. So it's not just physical health, it's emotional health, it's relationships, it's their growth. All of that comes into the fore. They begin to develop understanding about and strategies to manage the effects of change on body, mind and behaviour, and also to develop strategies to promote personal safety. Now, they already begin in foundation where there's a focus on being safe, staying safe, and being able to discuss experiences that may happen in the course of primary and on into post-primary, but also to consider the more negative sides there of bullying, possibly physical violence or abuse. So that continues on. And the third key concept is relationships, and obviously in that period they begin to really develop a much deeper understanding of relationships and how to navigate those, and that includes things like exploring the qualities of relationships, including friendship, boundaries, gender issues, what constitutes a healthy relationship. They also explore the qualities of a loving and respectful relationship and what that means, and also strategies to deal with challenging relationship scenarios that arise naturally within the course of their school and just at that stage of key stage 3 in their wider social life. They learn about conflict and also the implications of sexual maturation, including sexual health, fertility, contraception, conception, teenage pregnancy and childbirth. They learn to explore the emotional, social and moral implications of early sexual activity and also risk-taking. So all of that's very important. And within the other strand of learning for life and work, that's home economics. They learn about home and family, their role within the family scenario, and how roles change over time and how they need to begin to shape both their emotions and how they deal with the people, how they support each other within the family setting, and also looking at diverse family relationships and managing strategies or learning about strategies to manage family scenarios such as rivalry among siblings and so forth. So it's taking them really into that teenage phase, which is key stage 4, which obviously 14 to 16. And at that stage, they learn more about the fundamental skills that are prerequisites for life and work. And as you know, CCEA have a qualification at that stage, which is a very good way of looking at all of the key concepts within that. But basically, they include health, they include self-management, they include risk-taking, they include understanding of relationships and sexuality, and also roles and responsibilities of parenting. And also, more recently, since the intervention of the Secretary of State, they include the roles and responsibilities, the age-appropriate, comprehensive and scientifically accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights, covering prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion. So as you can see, it's complex, it evolves, there's a progression pathway throughout our curriculum, which is statutory, and the idea is that these children are nurtured along the way, the whole way through. Post-16, it becomes more elective. Young people can say what they want to have teaching and learning about, and they can open the way for schools to actually provide appropriate, age-appropriate support for RSE at that stage. At this stage, I'll pass over to Deirdre.
Okay, thanks, Saoirse. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to simply outline the resources that we have to support teachers in implementing an effective RSE curriculum. And basically, those are our RSE Hub and the RSE Progression Framework. So the RSE Progression Framework basically is a non-statutory progression framework giving guidance to teachers from foundation stage right up to post-16, and it shows them how they cover the priority themes, and those were commissioned by DE in the first instance. So those priority areas of RSE are things like consent, developments in contraception, domestic and sexual violence and abuse, healthy positive sexual expression and relationships, internet safety, LGBTQ+ matters, sexual and reproductive health and rights, social media and its effects on relationships and self-esteem, teen parenting, and period dignity and menstrual well-being. So it's a wide range of topics. It's a wide range of issues that have to be covered in an age-appropriate way. And so that's the progression framework is there as guidance for teachers to help them do that. The themes then and associated content across the key stages are obviously based, first of all, on the statutory curriculum, but they're also the guidance that's been developed through extensive research, and that extensive research has included both international and national frameworks. So we have looked beyond Northern Ireland to other jurisdictions, nationally and internationally, to look at what's happening there and to learn from those. Obviously, with such a broad spectrum of interests, we've also engaged with lots of stakeholders in health, in justice, and in online safety, for example. The main themes for primary, that's foundation through to key stage 2, are relationships, my body and development, that is health, growth and change, and safety and well-being, which includes self-awareness, feelings and emotions. For post-primary, then we have self-awareness, relationships and health. So again, they are based from the statutory requirements. The framework also aligns with the change to the curriculum, to the minimum content. Now the updated RSE framework is not yet on our website, so that will be going up in the coming weeks, basically. I think it's important that children and young people then are provided with a safe space to discuss these sensitive issues. So we basically have done that through the progression framework and through the hub and the resources that we've provided for schools. All of the issues should be discussed in a values-based, gender equality and human rights framework, and always in the best interest of the child. The RSE hub itself provides teachers with a repository of age-appropriate information, guidance on a range of topics and resources. We have produced resources on all of those topics that I've mentioned to you, and we have some still in development. But as well as that, we signpost then to other outside organisations. And we, again, have engaged with stakeholders in the development of that hub. So people like the Public Health Agency, NIHRC, the Education Authority, church representatives, and groups with specific areas of expertise. The educators can download guidance documents, they can download existing resources, and basically we have developed these to help teachers address these sensitive issues. The resources provide minimum content, they offer skills flexibility, and they can be adapted to meet the needs of the particular cohort that the teacher is working with. They should be delivered in line with the ethos and the RSE policy of the school, and basically it should be ensured that they meet the wide-ranging needs of young people. In all of our resources, there is a statement at the beginning reminding teachers to review the resources before they're used to ensure that they meet the needs of the school. As well as that, the hub has open access, so sometimes we hear about parents not knowing what the schools are teaching. Anyone can go onto the RSE hub, anyone can access the resources, and anyone can look at the progression framework. And of course, parents should be consulted on the development of the RSE policy within each school. Okay. Whenever we're looking at our resources, we use participative and interactive approaches to learning, developing knowledge, skills, and also making appropriate choices, mitigating risk, looking at effective communication and listening, managing manipulative situations, negotiation, challenging myths, challenging their own perceptions, and demonstrating respect for different perspectives, and respecting the rights of others as well as themselves. The hub also contains a training and professional development section with links to other organisations that offer teacher training and support for teachers and other educators, as well as parents and carers and Board of Governors. And many of those are also part of our stakeholder groups. The hub was suspended pending review in December 2023 and reinstated on the 7th of June 2024. There were no fundamental changes to the hub as a result of the review. Some information was updated and obsolete links removed. The findings from the review were that CCEA had followed a detailed and evidence-based approach to the development of age-appropriate resources and guidance for RSE. In addition, the materials have been developed by drawing on expertise, evidence and practice, and there's been a high level of engagement with key stakeholders at all stages. The engagement provided stakeholders the opportunity to review the materials and feed back to us, and where appropriate, then we have taken on board those suggestions and reviewed and enhanced the materials. And we'll keep the hub under annual review. And also we will be adding additional topics and resources to that hub as we move forward. We did hold a number of...
Probably going to just need to cut in at this point, I think, just to maybe open the floor up to questions on it. Is there anything really crucial that you needed to add there? But I think we're
I was just going to say that we did hold some teacher webinars as well to support teachers, and we had a really good uptake of those despite the fact that there was action short of strike. So it shows that the interest of teachers in this particular area of work.
Can I just add to that? Just throughout this journey, we're very aware of the interconnectedness of what we're trying to do and how it links to other strategies across government and across society. And for that reason, we've really engaged widely with for example, the Gillen Review Group, Implementation Group for Education, and also with the Online Safety Board with the elimination of violence against women and girls. And we see what we're doing as a very positive step towards changing society and ensuring that young people have the best opportunity to flourish and in the widest possible sense. And we have set up our stakeholder group in such a way that we have been able to get feedback and have the opportunity to have really deep discussions with a very diverse and wide range of groups with a responsibility and a remit to support children and young people. That's all.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I've had to cut in at that stage. We are just running a wee bit tight in time. Obviously, a lot of material there from CCEA, so I think members may want to come in on that.
I'm going for a call. I do want to ask a question. Come back in. Is that okay?
I'll add you on there, Robbie. That's no problem. So I just had one really question for the EA, and then I presume others may want to come in on CCEA. It has come up in some of the other sessions that we've had, and it's around the support for schools, but quite more specifically boards of governors. And I'll declare an interest. I am a board of governor in a controlled primary school. Would you be able to give us a sense of what level of support is available? Because we're conscious that a lot is made of the policies that schools set in terms of RSE. We're also very conscious it's complex, and there are a lot of competing interests and needs to work out in that space. What direct support and proactive support does the EA provide to boards of governors in that space?
Specifically in relation to RSE, Chair?
Yeah. In terms of their policy making,
it's very, very limited at this stage, other than we have an outline template that could be used as a possibility, but that is the limit of it at the minute. We simply don't have the resource to do more. And also, obviously, we have to be conscious of the fact that each individual school, and I mean, you'll be aware of this as a governor in a school yourself, has its own particular identity and ethos. It serves particular communities, and there'll be a range of views, from one school to the next. So obviously, that has to have some influence on the type of guidance and advice we provide. But it's very limited, Chair, very limited.
What's the level of uptake like from governors in terms of the training?
It is good. We're in the process of reconstitution at the minute, but for the previous academic year, if you like, when governors were already past their term in practically every instance, we had a very good level of uptake. Now, I would say generally across our whole training programme, it's all done entirely online. In relation to the specific small module on RSE, it was small at the start because it was only introduced in January after the Secretary of State's legislation was introduced, and obviously we're also at the stage where many boards of governors were coming to the end of their term. But yeah, we have a good uptake generally across the breadth of the training programme, and we expect to see that go up with reconstitution happening right now.
And then in terms of monitoring quality or whether a policy is fit for purpose or appropriate, that sits with ETI rather than yourselves?
It does, yeah.
Okay. No, that's fine. I'm happy to move on to Deputy Chair.
Thanks. And just a question for colleagues from CCEA in relation to the hub. And I suppose also the other, the webinar, teacher webinar, and the progressive framework, or the progression framework, whatever it is. Yeah. We have heard a lot from other stakeholders about the lack of confidence within the teaching profession to deliver this curriculum. And it seems, given that the fact that there are only 60% of schools who have contacted the hub, it seems to be quite a low number. Has CCEA done any investigation as to why more teachers and schools haven't been in contact?
I could just say our hub was launched formally in 2023, and it was a soft launch. I think we need to conduct a further campaign to ensure that all teachers out there are aware of the work that we're doing, and I think also that the percentage you quote dates from probably around 2022. I think we have conducted a series of webinars where even during Action Short of Strike, we had excellent turnout from teachers who were delighted to have the opportunity to discuss some of these issues at close quarters and to provide and demonstrate how they do it in their schools. So it's something that once we have the resource, we will do more of that. We know that there are particular areas within our hub that require very tailored, bespoke training for teachers to feel confident. And we don't have a remit for training, so we will need to collaborate, hopefully, with the Education Authority and other parties to do that. And I think there's also a need for strong leadership in schools to facilitate teachers who want to take forward a very positive RSE programme. We would like to work closely with the principals and school leaders to do that, to ensure that there is adequate time within the curriculum and the school timetable to actually do this properly. We know that in many cases it is squeezed due to other pressures that are in the curriculum, And that's something that we are constantly hearing of from the teachers, the practitioners out there. And once again, I think we do need collaboration with the leaders of the schools, with the EA and with the other partners in education to ensure that a more streamlined process can be put in place so that we can transform how RSE is delivered. So it's a long way maybe from your question, but I think we have been developing the resources even when ETI were doing their evaluation. So in a way, we're playing catch up. We were developing new resources the whole time. They were finding the facts from schools. I think if they were to do that now, they probably would find that more teachers are using our resources, and that certainly some of the gaps have been closed out from that. And it is an evolving process. It's totally dynamic. And, just year on year, we find that we have to address specific social, societal issues that are emerging. And we become aware of them from the media, but also from teachers, practitioners who know what the issues are in their community. And then they contact us. So we know that we are meeting the needs. And we really value that relationship with teachers to ensure that what we're doing is relevant and current. And I do believe that there's more marketing to be done on this, and there's also key messages required from all of the partners that want this to succeed to ensure that everybody's saying the same thing about RSE. And as you're aware, there has been a lot of misinformation around it. It has made the path very difficult for CCEA in particular, but also for some of our other partners. And we need to set that aside and look forward positively to see how can we work together to ensure that everybody understands the purpose, the benefits, the challenges, and also support us in what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Cara, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all very much for being here. I have 3 questions, but they're very short, so I'll just throw them out and then we'll see where we end up. My first question is just about the RSE Hub. And just looking at, I'm just curious how you monitor how much it is used by teachers, students and parents. Have you identified any gaps on what's on there? And then also, I'm mindful in conversations that I've had with Irish medium schools, they've often said there's challenges with things like translation and availability of translated resources. Is that an issue that you've come across? And then just with regards to the EA, I'm just mindful, can you make us aware of any programmes within the EA with youth work in which RSE is discussed, and maybe some of those wider topics around tackling misogyny, challenging rape myths, violence against women and girls as a whole. And does any of those discussions also include work around drugs and alcohol and how that can impact healthy relationships? And that's it for me.
It would be good to get
your question on the Irish.
I could just come in. Be good to get an answer to all 3 questions. Yeah. So if we can keep the answers really short and snappy to try and make sure they're all addressed.
I'll take your question around the data and who's accessing our hub. So we do keep the hub under continual review. It's a dynamic resource, and as colleagues have said, it's an area of the curriculum that there's new and emerging issues. So we do keep it under review, and so we have identified areas of development for this year, and that's through our engagement that we have. In terms of who accesses the hub, we do have data analytics, but we can't break that down into whether that's parents, teachers or students, children. We can do that through questionnaires and consultation, but that's the only way we can really access that information.
And just to add to that, the fact that the hub was down has been problematic as well, because obviously they couldn't access it during that period.
Was it for a long time it was down? Or?
It was down for 6 months, from January through until June. So it's back up again now, and we're at the beginning of a new year, and we do hope to really conduct a very strong marketing campaign in and around what's there, and open up opportunities for teachers to consult with us, which they do anyway. I mean, Deirdre and I receive lots of queries and questions about all of it and how to approach it, and the teachers are clearly crying out for tailored support in order to deliver it. They don't have the competencies in all, particularly the new stuff. And by that I mean, for example, our forward work plan includes the active bystander approach. We've got units coming out on upskirting, downblousing, cyber flashing, sextortion, with perimenopause, menopause, masculinity and the influence of positive role models, male victims of domestic abuse. And we're looking at violence against women and girls, including SEN, where they are particularly vulnerable in that space. So that's all. It's in preparation to go onto the site. We're just in the final stages of that. We've got a number of films coming out as well. We've worked with Cinemagic to produce short films on period dignity and also consent. And we find that a very effective way to get points across quickly to young people, using young people who are actually in that domain. And I mentioned already the interconnectedness, but with regard to Irish Medium, I'm responsible for Irish Medium and CCEA, and we have a programme of translation development. So as soon as our resources are complete, we have a list that we've agreed with Coláiste Freistia and Coláiste Gura as well, to see what are your priorities. So we're gradually working our way through that, but all of the new stuff is immediately translated and put up as soon as possible. And we are aware, we've taken on board the feedback from some of our webinars where the Irish medium teachers, they need, for example, maybe a glossary of terms to go with some of these things. So we're conscious of that, but once again, we're limited in resource. We have a translation unit and they cover all our translation services, but that's where it is. And we are committed to providing exactly the same for Irish Medium.
Right now, is there anything with translated into Irish on the hub? Okay,
yes.
So there is.
You'll find it on our site. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
And then the youth work query, pick up on that briefly. Yes, it very much does feature on the youth work curriculum, and EA Youth Service absolutely does have resources and support available to youth workers. The detail of that I don't have here today, but I'll absolutely get that from colleagues and have that sent back through the clerk. Absolutely.
If I could perhaps add to that, our progression framework includes post-16, and it is a resource that is accessed by youth groups also.
As our resources are also accessed by youth groups and are being used by the University of Ulster Higher programme, Healthy Young Adult Relationships. So they have looked at that in the progression framework and how that can go over into youth work.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cathy?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much for the information today. I just want to go back really briefly to something that the Chair mentioned there in the support given to Board of Governors and things. And to be honest with you, the answer you gave is very limited, is quite concerning. Especially it was a question I'd asked the department beforehand, and the answer given from them was quite different, and that there would be support given to Board of Governors and things like that. So it's something that I'd like to explore more, as to, maybe what's the future or what is the plan to start giving this support. I understand with resources and things like that, I do get it, but I do find it quite concerning. The other thing then was to get your view on the human rights report that we had received. There was some discussion around external providers, and what's your view on that, and how does that link in obviously then with the curriculum that you've set in terms of the hub and stuff too. And then there's just one last, you mentioned there, you actually wrote it down that, teachers at the minute don't have the competencies on the new stuff. Again, there's a fundamental issue there. There's a difference in, I suppose, a teacher being given a resource but actually having the confidence to deliver that resource. So what would your view be on how we actually give teachers the confidence rather than just the resources in this?
And I'll pick up on the Governor one. So all I can say is I have oversight of Governor training and provision of the Education Authority, and it is very limited at this stage, in particular, with particular focus on RSE. Do I agree that there needs to be more? Yes, 100%. That's what we hear from governors who are in contact with us. It's not the only area of the responsibility that they have concerns about. Obviously, they're wide-ranging, and there are many other issues that governors will ask for training and advice from, but our resource is limited. That's as much as I can say at this stage.
In relation to external providers, there's obviously a policy decision, and do advise, provide that advice around the use of external providers, and we do think it can enhance the delivery of RSE, but we don't feel it could replace effective RSE, because effective RSE should be delivered across the curriculum and should be embedded in that curriculum delivery. And we hear from young people that they don't feel it's effective if it's a one-off provider, while that can be a very useful tool and can be a very high quality, that's no compensation for a wider approach to, a more embedded approach to delivery of RSE.
And to that I'd add, these are big themes, big concepts, and to have just a one-off intervention from an external provider, it can provide basic facts, but we think that the best way to deliver RSE is in a safe space where you've confidence in the person delivering and where you have familiarity with them, where you're able to speak freely and all of that. And we do recommend that schools would consult with whoever the external provider is if they are going to go down that route. They can often do a combination. I mean, they could have an external provider and then a follow-up lesson just to clarify and open the discussion. But the best RSE, we feel, is delivered by teachers who know the young people, know the children in front of them and the context in which they're working. That said, we have on our website, we have engaged with many training providers, and we have included their links on our website. So schools do want to avail of very specific training, they can do that. And once again, we do a disclaimer because we can't be everywhere controlling the quality, but there are very reputable providers who have the best interests of young people at heart, and they can certainly provide some of the areas where the teachers don't have the competence. And with regard to the competence of teachers, what I was referring to there is the recent legislation on upskirting, downblousing, cyber flashing. It's all new since last November. And as a result of that, I mean, people will have heard that on the news probably, but they may not know how to, the details of the legislation. So our lesson plans are designed to bring them up to speed with the legislation. And also, in terms of sharing images, all of that, where young people are very vulnerable these days, we have done a lot of work to try and ensure that both online and in person, that they have an understanding of the law and how to stay within the law in terms of their behaviour. And it is a mountain to climb, because every time we think we've finished, there's some new concept comes in and we have to deal with that. But alongside the RSE, we've done an audit of our online safety site, and we are putting in place many new resources, including child sexual exploitation. We have we're hosting the PSNI resources on grooming and all the rest, so we're trying to bring it together. And when you talk about the preventative curriculum, it's all important. It is a kind of an umbrella category, if you like, for our website. To date, we've just had the RSE hub and the framework, and then we have online safety separately. But we are going to bring all that together to show the interconnections, both across life and across the curriculum, where there are opportunities for teaching and learning for schools, and really to show young people that it goes right across their whole life. It's not just a behaviour in a bedroom online. It actually impacts on the kind of person they become, and it is those are the points that we really want to get across. Hope that answers your question.
Well, I want to close there. And apologies to cutting some of this short, and I know from the CCEA perspective there's an awful lot you're going to want to bring here, but it's just in terms of our time scale. So I'd ask for the last couple of inquiries to really try and just keep those answers focused. I know it's difficult because you've got a lot you want to share. So Robbie, you're next there.
I'll be really short because there's been a lot of really good questions. In terms of the consent element in the curriculum, so this is technical. Is abstinence as part of it, and is the legality of sex under 16 covered in terms of, even if there is no such as consensual sex below 16, even just to commit to it? Because I'm very conscious that the criminal age of responsibility is going to be something that we're going to come forward with, hopefully, in this mandate. And it's very low in this year, it's 10, obviously, so that anybody involved in sex before, even if it's consensual between two under 16s, is that covered in every respect?
Yes, the short answer is yes.
Good.
To all of that. Okay. We have consent actually from foundation stage right up. So obviously consent. Just simply, am I allowed to hug you? In somebody else's space and all of that, right up to sexual consent, and the law on consent is visited and revisited. So to consolidate that learning. Abstinence, yes. And we look at abstinence through contraception. We look at it through the new resources on.
But my point on that would be it's difficult, because if you're, and I'm not against it, by the way. I'm just saying if we're teaching something that is kind of illegal, in that space, it's keep yourself safe. I'm thinking from a firefighter's perspective, when we were you know, you don't start fires and you stay away, you don't, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't teach people how to light a fire safely either.
No.
Do you know what I mean? So is it just that we've accepted as a society it's illegal, but we're going to do it, so we're going to, yeah.
It's an exploration in all of these resources. So, you know, it basically is looking at the implications of, you know, abstinence versus maybe contraception, because there is research that shows that abstinence-only approaches are not effective. So you need to look at it in the whole, in the round, basically, and give young people an opportunity to explore that in a safe environment.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just also add, we find that when we talk to young people, I think everybody thinks they're talking about sex all the time, but most of the young people we meet are interested in the relationships and how to talk to someone, another of the opposite sex. You know, that's how basic it is. They don't know how to talk to each other. And,
it's always a problem, to be fair. I mean, it's not new, that one.
You know, but that's the way it is.
Yes.
And also, just on the abstinence, you know, we have met with the stakeholders at milestones along the way and have looked at this in depth, you know, and the thinking really is that every child should feel comfortable in a classroom where we are discussing consent. So, you know, should it be a Christian child, a Muslim child, no matter what background or cultural background they're bringing to that group, that they can feel comfortable. And that's what we've talked about, respect and, you know, building this sense of self and the value of themselves and what they can bring, their opinions, their attitudes, all of that. That's the whole purpose of the curriculum, as opposed to some basic sex education. We don't just give them sex education and put them out there. It's about nurturing and developing the individual, to helping them to develop their own attitudes and values and see what they think and hear other views. And you know what? It doesn't do any harm to open their minds to that. We're not telling everybody go out and have sex. That is not the case, and that is part of the issue around the misinformation. All we're doing is presenting an opportunity to explore.
Michelle, you had indicated.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. I think you gave a really good sense of the scope and breadth of this, because people do seem to narrow in on just a few areas, and I think you've done a really good job at explaining that and articulating it. Three buzzwords, I think, across all of these today have been opt-out, ethos and confidence. So the first one then, we've talked about the confidence of teachers to deliver, but what about teachers who are just uncomfortable or disagree with how the school that they teach in are teaching RSE? Is there support for them in that context? Also then on the ethos point, is there ever in your mind a conflict or an undermining of the teaching of scientifically accurate material in the context of ethos in some schools? I had another question, but I think you've answered it. So in the interest of the chair's sanity, I'll leave it there.
Appreciate it.
In relation to teacher confidence and competence, you know, there will be teachers who are new teachers who aren't experienced in teaching the matters. Even those who are experienced, as emerging issues come up, they may not feel they have the knowledge, never mind the competence to be able to explore and facilitate the conversation. They may not have the knowledge to do that. So I think that's an ongoing, if a teacher's delivering RSE, it's an ongoing professional learning. We do have a role in that, in the guidance that we provide, in the resources that we provide, in the progression framework, you know, to support the schools so that they can feel more confident to deliver it.
Can we more as well? You know, if the way the school's advocating teaching RSE perhaps they feel isn't appropriate, or perhaps isn't following the curriculum properly, or maybe it's an ethos clash between that individual and the school, is there support for teachers then?
See, this is where I think the leadership comes in.
Yeah.
It would probably be more a matter for the employers, and it's a very difficult one. It's a very real one. I mean,
we acknowledge the ethos within every school is different, and we understand that they have the right to develop their own policy in consultation with parents, the boards of governors, and the principal, and teachers. And I mean, we have encountered this. You know, we've attended many conferences where we have heard the experiences of some teachers who felt one way or the other about the particular ethos, but it's just not within CCEA's gift to be able to address those issues. We have to take, I suppose, an equality-based, value-based approach to all of this. we've developed generic guidance, we've advised teachers to look at the resources in the context of your cohort of pupils and decide what's appropriate and what isn't for you. We're not saying you must. And whilst there's a statutory curriculum, none of our resources are mandatory. They're there to support. If they don't like them, they can look elsewhere, and hopefully they'll find what they need. But I do question, though, why any teacher in today's changing world, where there's so much evidence of young people being presented with very difficult experiences of grooming, online abuse, bullying, expectations of all kinds. I don't understand why anyone would think it's a good idea not to provide such education. So there's different ways of doing it. And that's without disrespecting anyone. I just think it's important that people focus in on the world where we are now and be realistic. And you've mentioned consent and legislation. That's right. It's not legal to have sex under 16, but we have no control over whether people do or not. We have to provide safe information that allows people to protect themselves in every situation going forward.
Michelle, you'd indicated you're not coming in. Yeah.
No, it's all
okay.
Just really quickly, is that okay?
Yeah, just in terms of time, we are definitely committed to a 5 o'clock cut-off. There's a big bank of correspondence to get through, so if I could just ask everybody to keep question and answer really short here so we can get through the rest of the business and hear the answer to the inquiry, obviously.
Very quick. There was a letter that was sent to principals from a Raymond Carville in the Department of Education, and it just noted a change to legislation was brought by the Secretary of State does not apply to primary schools. It applies to only specific elements of the RSE curriculum at post-primary, and details that. So see the information that is on the RSE hub for primary schools, is that information that has always been there, has always been taught, so there's no change to that, or what?
Yeah, there's no change to that. So the Secretary of State's changes were specifically in relation to Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, in relation to access to abortion and prevention of early pregnancy. So that's literally all that was. That doesn't change the minimum content for RSE for primary. It doesn't change the resources that we have in relation to other topic areas for primary or post-primary. So it was very, very specific, that letter.
So that information was always there, always available?
Yes.
Yeah. And I have been on the hub, I have looked, there's a lot on there. It's very overwhelming. Is there any way that could be placed for parents to go on and have a look to actually see? Because a lot of the stuff, we talk about misinformation, parents want to know exactly what could be potentially being taught. If that is the case, is there a piece of work there that could be done to say that this is where this is sitting at the moment, this is the potential here to be taught, so parents can have a look at that and actually feel comfortable, or if they don't, they have that choice then to actually feed in to further engagement?
I don't think so, because the hub is a generic site and it's self-selecting. You can use it if you want. I think if the parents want to know what's being taught, they should ask the school for information about their programme for RSE and to see what their policy is. And ideally, they should be feeding into it. There should not be any grey areas there where the parent isn't clear about what's being taught. But, definitely it's not CCEA's remit to insist that a particular thing is used. We don't do that. We provide resources to support teaching and learning, and beyond that, it is the role of the professionals in schools, the teachers and the school leaders and the parents who are investing in that education to actually seek information on that. And I think that was one of the issues about the misinformation. It blurred the roles and responsibilities of all.
We did provide some guidance for parents for parent kind, and that's on their website. So it's just an overview of RSE and what's involved, and some links to the materials that we provide.
Appreciate it, thank you.
David, we're going to go 1 minute here.
It's just it's more to comment from what you said rather than a question so much. I think that for those that have concerns around RSE and so on, I'm not sure exactly what misinformation specifically has caused the annoyance, but it is being packaged alongside things that are traditionally across the world quite controversial subjects, and I think that is what causes people to be concerned about. So you hear people expressing concerns about RSE, but actually it's about limited elements. I don't think anybody, to my knowledge, that I've spoke to, there may be individuals, but in general, I don't think there's a huge opposition to kids being taught skills that could protect them online or anything like that. There are specific elements of this which are naturally going to cause some disagreement across political spheres, but also in society. And I think that's the concerns that are being expressed. So it's not a. I haven't talked to many people who are just opposed to RSE in its entirety. Whenever you actually get to talk to them, they might talk about RSE, but when you get to talk to them, it's about very limited elements of it. It's not about some of those things which are common sense and you would have expected children to be taught anyway. But I just think it's important to clarify that.
That's fine.
It's inevitable, really, because
I'm going to unfortunately have to draw a line at this point. There's so much we could talk about. I think as the breadth of resources that are there, I think we could have talked all afternoon about it. So apologies if I've had to cut any of your contributions short. I really appreciate you presenting this afternoon. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So very quickly, in terms of any actions specifically arising from that?
I think I just have one follow-up with John.
On the youth work
on the youth
side.
work provision.
Exactly. Could we maybe just get clarity around the response from the department around the support given to the Board of Governors? Because I just think there's a bit of a contradiction in...
I was going to flag that. I mean, if today's sort of maybe highlighted anything, it's going to be very difficult to produce a report we're all going to agree on, but I think we maybe could all agree that Boards of Governors could do with more support, and the lack of support that's currently available is
the
definitely
department
an issue.
answer was just different to the EA answer, so it would just be good to get clarity on
worth getting clarity. That's fine. Okay, so look, thank members for their patience. That was three fairly meaty evidence sessions, and we have a job of work to do if we're going to get through those quickly, so I will need everybody to assist me with that in the weeks ahead. Next item on the agenda is item 9, which is correspondence. So there is a lot more than usual here because we've had a lot come through over the summer, but I have tried as far as I possibly can to leave anything off here that is in any way if it's covered in the clerk's correspondence note in your packs and it seemed non-controversial, I won't be highlighting it. So if you do have any particular items you want to raise, please do come in. I'm just going to go through anything at all where there's a need for a decision, and we'll try and do this as quickly as we can. And if people can just quickly confirm their agreement or otherwise, we can move through this. So pages 192 to 529 gives you a sense of how much there is there, and that's 76 items of correspondence, as well as an additional couple of pieces that came through in tabled papers. So 9.1 and 9.66, response from the Department of Education regarding the post-special educational needs SEND provision in education, employment and training for those with learning disabilities in Northern Ireland. I want to just highlight it very quickly because I think we've all had contact from the Caleb's Cause campaign. I would just want to note there's probably a fair bit in there that we'll want to look at, and I think when we're hearing evidence around SEND services and transformation in the future, we'll want to draw out. So I wanted to particularly highlight that for members, but in terms of an action, assuming content to share with the Caleb's Cause campaign, and they may well want to come back. We agreed?
Agreed.
Item 9.2, that's a response from the Minister of Communities regarding funding for the Skull Spraga scheme. And then at 9.52, a response on the same issue from the Minister of Education. I would want to propose that we share that response with Gail Lynn, who were the organisation who ran that scheme. And I would be of a mind to note our disappointment that there was no commitment from the relevant executive ministers to really engage with the scheme at all, and that is regrettable. But certainly to draw it to that organisation's attention. Are we agreed? Item 9.3, correspondence from Our Lady in St Patrick's College about the launch of their Female Voices resource. I think this has come through committee previously. This resource has been mentioned. It's been developed by a group of students, years 9 to 14, promoting the role of women and tackling sexism and misogyny in society. They were offering a briefing to the committee, so I wanted to suggest, the clerk I think it helpfully suggested that perhaps we could try and schedule that in on International Women's Day for whatever we're doing that on the 8th of March next year. And I would also suggest we would perhaps want to draw that group's attention to the RSE inquiry if they wanted to share anything in relation to that resource for that. Are we agreed? Mm-hmm. Item 9.31, correspondence from Causeway Neurodiversity regarding the educational psychology allocation model. The letter highlights some concerns that it appears the department and the Education Authority are perhaps on a different page, and there seemed to be an unawareness at department level that the EA had perhaps changed a policy and procedures around allocation of ed psych time. I think to maybe try and get some clarity on that, I think the suggestion that there is a bit of a divergence there is one that I think we would want to pick up on. Are we content that we write to the department and seek clarity on exactly where that policy sits, and ensuring that communication with schools is clarified on that going forward? Agreed. Item 9.32, response from the IEF to issues around the integrated sector, and let's get very quickly content that we share that with the individual who raised that issue. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Item 9.37, invitation to the chair of the committee from the European Jewish Association to take part in their delegation to Auschwitz in commemoration of Kristallnacht on the 18th to 19th of November. As much as I would have liked to, I am not available to travel on those dates, so I just want to seek members' views if there is anybody else who would be interested in attending that, or if we need to give apologies for that invitation. If members can check their diaries and then just through the clerk come back on that, but I think it would be a good one to have representation at.
Yeah, I think I could be. It should maybe clarify as well how it's booked and so on. It's whether, because I think we have to book our own flights and so on. What I would say is some of us got individual ones, I think, but when I even looked at flights sort of speculatively, trying to fly yourself in and out is very, very difficult.
Logistically tricky, so perhaps maybe that if anyone potentially interested wants to go through the clerk perhaps on those queries, and we can take that one from there. Item 9.38, response from the Northern Ireland Forest Schools Association, and it was expressing in quite strong terms disappointment in the response they received from the department in terms of issues they had raised. And I think given our engagement with the Forest School, that's one I would like to highlight and propose we write to the department and ask them for their response to the Forest School's issues. Are members agreed? Item 9.4, it's correspondence from the Board of Governors of Lisnagarvey High School, and that's in relation to their capacity to operate a SPIM and some concerns around the process that was undertaken in relation to that. Are members content that we share that letter with the Education Authority and ask them to provide their response? Members agreed. Item 9.42, it's correspondence from the Daily Mile asking to present their research to the committee. I was going to suggest we put that into forward work planning, but I think in the interest of just getting through the business, we have a session booked in at the beginning of October around sport and PE. That feels like a good one to bring them in on, so if that fits in their space in the agenda, are we content we offer an invite on that basis? Item 9.45, it's correspondence from a nursery school principal. It is asking to brief the committee on the issue of principal release time for nursery principals. I have engaged with this individual, so declare that, but she is looking to brief the committee, I think, as a cluster of principals coming forward on that. I mean, I would be content that we do offer an informal briefing on that issue, if members are agreed. Agreed. Item 9.46, that is correspondence from an individual who has been corresponding with the committee previously in relation to response from the EA on indoor air quality. My understanding is that individual is actually scheduled to brief the committee in the forward work plan, so perhaps if that... Yeah.
In an informal meeting,
in an informal briefing. So that's already diarised. Are we happy that we respond to say that we're happy to hear those issues at that time?
Just Chair, there's no commercial interest there, is there?
Not as far as I am aware. No, not as far as I'm aware. And if it's the individual that I think it is, that in terms of my engagement, it does seem to be at a policy level rather than promoting any commercial interest. Item 9.47. Is correspondence from an individual on the need for domestic abuse education in schools, and just again, this individual is someone that I have engaged with directly. They've approached me directly, and I would suggest that we should consider offering her the opportunity to provide evidence to the RSA inquiry, but also to schedule an informal briefing. Now, I think we need to be realistic in terms of our committee time over the next while. Not all of this will be happening soon, and there's probably a degree of expectation management for anyone writing in at the moment, but I would suggest that it would be appropriate to offer her the opportunity to brief.
It fits into the inquiry.
It fits in very well to the inquiry.
Most people will present in this kind of format so that we can have a Hansard record and that we can broadcast it and things, but there may be people who have sensitive circumstances, and that means the informal.
I would suggest there may be some informal
better.
briefings if it is relying on personal experience of an issue like domestic abuse, that would be the more appropriate setting. So again, if we're happy to take that forward. Item 9.53, it's correspondence from the Minister of Education, and it was in relation to his intention to make an urgent written statement to members on the issue of a data breach. Which did go out. I would suggest that in response to that we should write back as a committee to the department seeking an update on any issues arising from that data breach, but also in terms of what the department is doing to refresh that guidance in relation to information security within the department. Are members agreed? Right. Item 9.55, it's a response from the Education Authority on youth service provision. Are we content that we do write back to the Education Authority? There may be issues arising from the correspondence, but I would like to suggest that we express disappointment with the timescale. And it was over 3 months, I think, for a response, which is not really good enough. So if members are agreed. Right. Item 9.56, correspondence from the Northern Ireland Children's Commissioner seeking a meeting with the Chair and Deputy Chair to discuss their priorities for children and young people. Nikki is briefing the committee as part of the RSE inquiry, but I understand that we have a date in the diary for that, and it's just whether or not...
I think it's the 2nd of October.
So just making sure.
Maybe you could mingle a bit afterward or in the margins of that meeting if there's a need for informal.
So if even you can circulate the date of that with other members, if there was any other opportunity to
the table for
engage.
Actually.
That's great. Okay. Item 9.58, correspondence from an individual with concerns about how a local school was spending its funds, particularly in relation to keeping heat on, allegedly over the summer months. My proposal would be that we refer that on to the Education Authority and ask them to engage with the school over any concerns around maybe how those funds were being spent in terms of heating budgets. Are members agreed? Item 9.62, correspondence from the Minister of Education, and that's in relation to his urgent oral statement in relation to the publication of guidance on the use of pupil mobile phones in schools. I would like to propose on this, and this is something we'll probably hear evidence about at some point over the next number of months, and I think that the whole issue of the impact of mobile phones and screen time in education is one that is going to be very relevant. But I think particularly I would like to just suggest on the pilot project and the spend that was agreed, if there would be agreement to write to the Minister to seek a bit more information on the business case that went into informing that decision, particularly in terms of value for money and any consultation around that spending decision. I think there have been some questions asked about whether in the current budgetary context it was the most appropriate spend. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Item 9.64 is a response from the Education Authority. We are getting there. We'll do this by 5. I'll do my very best here. Response from the Education Authority on the provision of SEND services from the current 4 main non-statutory preschool providers. Are we happy to share that with those providers? Are we agreed? Right. Apologies to have to raise some of these. Just if it wasn't covered in the clerk's note, I do need to seek that agreement. Item 9.71, correspondence from Dr. William Kitchen of Stranmillis University College, seeking a meeting with the committee to discuss curriculum reform. We do have curriculum reform on the agenda over the next number of months, so are we content that we factor that in as part of our ongoing forward work programme? Okay. Item 9.72, correspondence from Fingerprint Learning, seeking to brief the Committee on Enterprise and Entrepreneurial Education. I think they were specifically seeking a meeting with Chair and Deputy Chair. I would suggest at this stage, with packed agendas, that we perhaps go back and ask them to send in a more detailed written briefing, and then if there are matters arising from that, we can take it from there. Members agreed? Item 9.74, correspondence from an individual about difficulties they have had in accessing SEN education. Are we happy to share that with the Education Authority and seek their response to the issues raised? Great. Item 9.75, correspondence from an individual about specific issues in their case around a SEN placement. Again, our members content, as the correspondence was directed to the Minister, that we share that with the department and highlight the committee has been contacted and ask that we be included in any response. Are we agreed? Right. Item 9.76, it is correspondence from CNG in relation to their interactions with CAG on the Irish language transfer test, and you'll remember there was an individual who had contacted us raising their concerns about the process and how they had experienced it. I'll just reference at this stage, as it does link in item 9.78 in tabled papers was correspondence from CEAG that's the other issue, that CEAG have provided their response to that individual's concerns that we had flagged with them, and then we have CCEA also raising some issues about their engagement with CEAG. I was going to suggest, in terms of a way forward with this, that we share CEAG's response. So that is the one at 9.78 in table papers. We share that with the individual to make them aware of that. But I would also suggest that perhaps we share that correspondence with CCEA as well, and ask them perhaps to come back with more detailed proposals and recommendations of how they think the process with CEAG could be improved. There definitely appear to be issues there, and I think it would be good to maybe drill down into that into a bit more detail, and CCEA may be best placed to help us understand the landscape a bit better. Are members agreed on that? Agreed. Okay, so that is us through. So are members content, other than those many items of correspondence, are we content to dispose of it as per the summary note at page 192? Sorry,
just really quickly, just in terms of there should be correspondence that came in from Carrickfergus Grammar. I know it was probably at the cut-off point, but it's just really important if you can have a look at that for me.
Okay, is that in papers?
It's not in those papers because of the cut-off time, but it has been sent directly to both yourselves.
And is that in terms of to carry that forward to next week's agenda? Is it time sensitive?
It is time. If it could be looked at, it would be.
Well, if there was capacity to obviously, I mean,
if I could see it, I would send it to everybody.
Certainly could be shared with committee members, and then if there's, if there is a need for a time sensitive action.
It is there. Can you see your email?
I'll just check.
From Cheryl.
Just check my phone.
So many windows.
It seems to have logged itself out. One second. So other than that, we'll move on. Just while I check that email, we'll move on to item 10, which is forward work plan. So I've seen that correspondence has come through from you, Cheryl. Would you be happy that the clerk circulates that with all members, and then we can maybe have a think about if there's a need for any sort of action from the committee in advance of next week? Okay. Forward work plan. So I'd refer you to the draft forward work plan at page 531. I think ordinarily I would ask the clerk to be speaking to this in a bit more detail, but our time is going to beat us. There's a couple of things that I wanted just to highlight. If there's anything that I missed then, that please do just come in. I want to just specifically note next Tuesday there are a couple of slightly more unusual commitments in terms of the timings of them. So there is a briefing with a group, Peaches, who had been in touch with us previously, and that is scheduled for Tuesday lunchtime, and that's been in the diary for a while, because they were keen to get an in-person informal briefing. So that was the slot that was agreed. So I mean, I hope members will be able to attend that. There is an event on the 15th of October scheduled in for a youth engagement event around RSE, but it was in at a lunchtime event, so I don't think that's going to work for youth engagement, as we're right in the middle of the school year, so we'll need to reschedule that to possibly something that's early evening.
We'll probably keep that booking and maybe see another RSE stakeholder.
And see if there's another RSE stakeholder.
Yeah.
So I would just sort of suggest, really just in general terms, and I'd ask perhaps if members could feed back over the course of the week before next committee, and once you've had time to maybe digest the forward work programme. With the RSE inquiry, it is obviously going to take up a good chunk of our time, but I also don't want the committee to lose sight of some of its priority issues that we'd been wanting to work on. And I think there's so many pressures in education, I don't think people want to hear us just talking about a single issue between now and December, although we do need to complete the inquiry and hear the evidence fully and thoroughly. So I really am just going to ask, there are plenty of gaps in the plan post October recess, so there's plenty of scope, I think, to find a balance between the inquiry and from other stakeholders, and I think even the programme we've got until recess is reasonably balanced. We have a mix of things coming through, so please do come back, probably through the clerk or myself, with anything that you think is missing there or that you would like to see in those post-recess sessions. I would just need to ask probably for a bit of flexibility from members. There may be the odd session that is a Tuesday lunchtime or an early evening session. We can try and coordinate diaries, but to facilitate good engagement, and I think particularly with young people, taking your comments on board earlier, David, in terms of the broadest spectrum, but that's really all I can say at this stage, and we'll try and have that populated, a bit more detail for next week. Yeah. Does anyone have anything briefly they want to say, or do you want to add anything, Clark?
I mean, I have actually updated it with everything that we have discussed, so it should have 2 briefings a week. I know you wanted to try to keep to 2 briefings a week. You'll notice that there are, in the main meeting that is, you'll notice that there's effective questioning on the 25th of September. That'll be in the main meeting and that will take 2 hours. So we can have, we've got some written material coming in from the department that day. We can have another briefing if you wish, but do tell me if you don't want one, if you just want a 2-hour meeting. And also, we don't have the minister in yet for this term, so to help with all of that, diarising that, if there are particular priorities that you want the minister to address, please let me know, and then we'll get that scheduled as soon as possible. Yeah,
that's fine.
Sorry, see, just on the Tuesday, the other committee events on the Tuesday ones, could we get like a diary invite or something for those maybe out? Because I know that we slot on Tuesday, we book up all the time. Like I know next week I've already got a meeting in, but if I had them in advance in the diary, it'd be great.
You'd forget otherwise.
I mean, I'm really conscious members' time is really, really, really under pressure, and I know that on a Tuesday it is again that 1 to 2 slot is precious for a range of different commitments. So look, I think as much of advanced scheduling on that.
I have an
There'll be
issue
food, which will help as well, because it'll help you bridge. No, but the lunchtime, there will be some food here for you. So
I'm only deputy, so I can probably get along. But if it was needed at business committee, I would. It just depends.
We are aware. I think we'll all just have to be prepared to flex, and we may not have full, attendance at all of these. And I think that to make sure there's detailed notes coming through from them as well, as we'll hopefully help manage that. Try and minimise the Tuesday lunchtime ones. I mean, I suspect even an early evening on a Tuesday might be better when members are in the building for some people. So. That's I think that's probably everything on forward work planning. So item 11, any other business? The only bit I have is from Cara on a bereavement policy from CCEA.
Just very briefly, it's a case that came to my attention in my constituency office. A very capable, bright student had just lost their mother, who received a diagnosis of cancer and was 3 weeks later sadly passed away. Just days following her passing, he sat his exams, and this is a straight A student, and sadly he got C's and he feels really unhappy about it. And I was speaking with his father about navigating, of course, grief in the classroom, and they found it really, really complex when going through CCEA to get advice on bereavement policy. So I was thinking, having spoken with yourself, even just around it on the 18th of November, there's Child Grief Awareness Week, and perhaps we could bring in, I was thinking maybe CCEA Director of Qualifications, just to talk through what the policy currently is, and maybe if it can be improved, or if we need any additional clarity. That I think that would be really beneficial.
Yeah, I'm certainly very happy if members are agreed to facilitate that. We already have Marie Curie scheduled to come in. They have a grief education programme that they are really keen to roll out more widely, and they're coming into brief committee on that, so that all is a really good fit. And I think to have the policy angle in terms of from the qualification side would be really helpful. So
thank you very much.
I'm very happy with that. Okay, so that just leaves us to date, time and place of next meeting. So Wednesday the 18th of September, room 29, 2 p.m. And to put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourn. We agreed.
Committee room 29. Sound.